Committee. This meeting is being webcast. I'm going to begin with the emergency procedure, which is that in the event of the alarm sounding again, it won't be a test. So please leave the room via the lobby, the way you came in, and then turn right and walk down the ramp. The assembly point is in front of the cathedral. I'd like to advise members in the public that Councillor Al Maghrabi is no longer on the committee, and I'd like to welcome Councillor Kerry Bales as a new committee member. Welcome, Kerry. Next, we're going to do introductions for myself and the other members of the committee. So, my name's Barry Parsons. I'm a local councillor for Easton, and I'm the chair of this committee. And I'm going to ask the members to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Eddy.
Councillor Richard Eddy, I'm Vice Chairman and Councillor for Bishopsworth.
Jerome Thomas, Councillor for Clifton.
Siwasiso Shabalala, Councillor for Central.
Lisa Stone, Councillor for Windmill Hill and Totterdale.
Caroline Gooch, Councillor for Westbury and Headleys.
Rob Logan, I'm Councillor for Philwood, member of the committee.
Councillor Bales, Hartcliffe and Withywood, and these are my pupils from a local senior school that are shadowing me for the week. So this is Godrina and Arnie.
Really pleased to welcome you both. And thank you, everybody. I'm going to ask officers to introduce themselves as they start talking about their respective papers. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence and substitutions. We've received apologies from Councillor Zoe Peat. Are there any further apologies? I don't think there are. Great. Item 3 is declarations of interest. So I'm now going to ask committee members, do you have any interest to declare in relation to any of the items of business on today's agenda? I'm seeing shakes of the head. Item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting.
I'm a council tenant, and we've got the tenant lease agreement, so obviously I'm a tenant. So
thank you, Sips, that's understood. Thank you very much, Sips. Yeah, there's no need to record that specially. Thank you. Right. So, agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. There's one set of minutes to be approved, and those are from the meeting held on Friday the 19th of September 2025. I'd like to move those minutes as a correct record and ask for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Now, next I'd like to ask the committee if you're happy to confirm those minutes as a correct record, which I will then sign. Great. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 is Chair's announcements.
Shame.
Thank you very much. So, what I'm going to ask is that I'm going to ask one of our officers if they can speak to you, Claire, and we can get the details that we need in order to be able to address your case. I'm going to need to carry on with this meeting, though. We've got a lot of business to get through. We have a responsibility to make sure that we get through all of the very important business here, which is. The business on our agenda is really important to every resident in our council homes, everyone who's homeless or at risk of homelessness in Bristol right now. So we are going to have to carry on with this meeting, but we are, as I say, we're very happy to speak to you outside of this meeting and get the details that we need to address your case.
The chairman has outlined how we can deal with the issue, and I think that's important. We actually do it something concrete.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm gonna hand over to Sonia Fursland, who's our executive director for housing.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you coming and raising with this, and I hope that Acorn know that when Acorn have contacted me in the past about specific issues with residents not having damp and mould address in their home, that I always am happy to come out and meet with the resident, take a look at the property, bring a surveyor with me, understand what works are required, make sure those works are done, but also understand whether there's any process learning or stuff that we have not been doing where we need to make systemic change. So I can absolutely give you my undertaking as Executive Director for Housing that I will meet you after this committee. I will come out to your home. I will bring a surveyor with me. I can't meet you right now because we do have some business for this committee to meet. But I will happily meet you after this meeting, and I will happily come to your home and bring colleagues with me and ensure that works are done.
Okay. Right, we do need to carry on with this meeting, I'm afraid, and we're going to have to do that. We are going to have to carry on with this meeting. We have a lot of business to get through, a lot of which actually relates to the issues of safety and health in people's homes. Now we've got a public forum item coming up, which is the formal opportunity for members of the public to come and get involved in our committee and speak to the members. But I'm afraid that if disruption continues, I'm going to have to ask for the chamber to be cleared. Now, the next item of business on our agenda is the Chair's announcements. Now, one of those announcements is around the introduction of Awab's Law. Awab's Law is a new requirement on housing providers such as the Council that means that we have to respond to reports of hazards in homes, including damp and mould, within specified timescales. The Council has adopted a new policy and brought in new resource in order to be able to work through the very large backlog of damp and mould cases that we unfortunately inherited from the previous administration. We are still working through that backlog. There's a lot of work yet to do, and we know that we haven't yet been able to fix the damp and mould issues in everybody's homes, and we're really sorry for that. We are going to continue with our agenda, and we're going to talk about these issues which affect very large numbers of people living in our homes right now. And as I've said, and as Sonia has said, we're very, very happy to meet with you outside of this meeting to get the information we need to come and visit and deal with your case. Absolutely, absolutely. I can guarantee that we will be getting in touch. We can speak to you right now, and we can come out and visit. And yeah, we are going to be doing everything that we have to do to make sure that that the damp and mould in your home is addressed. We also have other business to get through, which means that we will be able to address damp and mould for the many thousands of people who are affected by that today. I think if you'd like to stay for the rest of the meeting, when we'll be discussing our consumer standards programme and we'll be discussing our response to Awab's law, we'll be discussing the progress that we've made on addressing damp and mould and hazards in people's homes, then hopefully you will get some of the answers to the questions that you've got. For now, I am going to carry on with today's agenda. Okay, I think we're going to need to ask for the chamber to be cleared, aren't we? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask for the chamber to be cleared of members of the public, please.
Barry, I'm really happy to go and meet them now, on your behalf.
Okay.
I'll go and do it.
Thank you.
Right, I'll go and meet you now.
Okay, thanks very much. Right. Okay, and the next item on our agenda, in fact, is public forum. So this is the opportunity for members of the public to have their say. And we have received a number of questions and a number of statements today, so we're going to try and get through those today. We've got half an hour allowed for this item, and we are going to begin with our questions. Now, the questions and the replies have been circulated to committee members, and they've also been published on our website in advance of this meeting. Questioners have the opportunity to ask up to 2 oral supplementary questions, if you wish. Supplementary questions have to arise directly out of the original question or the reply. And we may have to get back to you in writing depending on the content. So our first of 8 public questions we've received today, both from Ruth Day on the Living Rent Commission and on national lobbying for rent controls. Now, hi Ruth. Now you've hopefully seen the written response that we provided for you earlier. So I'm going to ask if you'd like to go straight into any supplementary questions that you have.
Perfect. I'll stand up. Thank you, Barry. Thank you very much for your responses. So I do have 2 supplementary questions. So March 2025, we were told that the Living Rent Commission Task and Finish Group would be set up after the Metro Mayor election in May. And then we didn't have any response until Shelter offered to be co-chair in September. And then we had no response on when things would move forward until last week. And it's quite concerning in the response that the commitment is only that a meeting will be set up in the coming months. As committee members have offered and identified next steps, will you commit to reinstating the Commission Task and Finish Group in November? And it's also really great to hear about the national lobbying that you've done. Now that the Renters' Rights Bill has royal assent, will you now be developing a private renters strategy which incorporates all this work on rent controls? Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Yeah, absolutely. I'm very happy to commit to both of those things. Very happy to meet in November. I think that's absolutely right. Really pleased that that Shelter have stepped up and offered to co-chair this commission with us. I don't know how much members of the public are aware of how the one city structure works, but really the idea of it is that it's something that is shared between the council and other organisations, voluntary sector organisations and others across the city, so that all the work that we do isn't just the council doing things to people. It's about people really sharing that responsibility and sharing the ability to drive change. And so we're really pleased that Shelter have now stepped up and said that they're going to co-chair this with us. It means there's a real opportunity now for all the work of that commission to be co-produced between the council and all of our partners. really grateful for that. Really looking forward to meeting next month. And yes, we're looking forward to the passage of the Renters' Rights Act as it will be, and we will be presenting to this committee our response to that Act and all of the work that we're going to be doing to support renters. More broadly, I think you may have seen that the Green Party recently adopted a pretty comprehensive approach to what happens with the future of private renting. We've talked about abolishing landlords. We're talking about introducing rent controls. We're talking about introducing powers for local authorities to take homes out of the public sector and use them for social housing. These are things that are desperately needed, I think, by the many thousands of people who don't currently have a decent or affordable home in the private rented sector. Ruth, do you have a second supplementary question? That's great, thank you. Okay, going to move on then. And our third question was from Shelter around the renewal of the Bristol City Council and Carradon nomination agreement. Is there a representative of Shelter here? I'm not seeing them. Okay, we'll move on to our next question then, which is from Dan Ackroyd. Dan, you've hopefully seen the written response. Would you like to ask your supplementary questions? You have up to 2.
Yes, please. First of all, the answer given doesn't say how the public will be informed about the ongoing mitigating actions. So how I've been following the changes that have been done to the housing department and the rollout of the NEC system. How am I going to be able to follow those similar works in the future? Because there's still a huge chunk of work to be done.
Thanks, Dan. So I think that's something that ought to be captured within the risk reports and within the Housing Consumer Standard Programme reports. Sonia, would you like to add a bit more detail, flesh that out a bit?
Sure. So the Consumer Standards Programme, Dan, comes to this committee, and underneath that global risk, as you know, there are a number of separate risks which we regularly review in relation to.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Hopefully that's helpful.
Not really. I'll use my second supplementary to ask the same question in a different way. The previous risk reports laid out the future work that was being done, planned out, up to our sixth is a couple of years work in the future. Yeah. My understanding is, I didn't read the latest Consumer Standards report for this committee in detail, but my recollection is that doesn't actually lay out the work that's going to be done in the future. It only says what's happened so far. So again, how am I going to be able to understand what changes are coming to the housing department for the years to come?
Thanks, Dan. I think I don't think we'll need to treat that as your second question, because, as you say, I think it's about clarifying your initial one, isn't it? So yeah, Sonia, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. So I think, Dan, quite often a lot of the work that we've been doing as part of the consumer standards programs have been driven by external reviews that we've had to get some external oversight to establish where are we now, what are the recommendations for change, and all of the plans that result from those external reviews do normally come as part of an appendices, and that sets out the future work. So, for example, when we had we had a review of our approach to damp and mould, we've had a review of our approach to asbestos, and we had an overall review from Savills. All of those resulted in plans to address the recommendations within those reports, and they do come to committee.
Welcome to ask another supplementary if you'd like, Dan. Okay, thank you very much. So Then my final two questions are from Evie Rothwell. Is Evie here? No. Okay. All right then. Let's move on to public statements then. And so we've got two statements, the first of which is from Ruth Day. Ruth, you are welcome to, you can either read your statement or you can speak to it if you prefer to.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Barry, for your commitment to meet in November. We're really excited to work with you. But yeah, we thought it's important to read out this statement about the urgent need for action on rent controls. So my name's Ruth, and I'm from the Bristol Fair Renting Campaign. Our group of private renters came together because we've all been affected by the broken renting system in this city. And recently published ONS data shows that Bristol is one of the most unaffordable places to rent outside of London, with the average monthly rent now at £1,778 per month. Extortionate rents in our city will continue to drive homelessness, price communities out of the city, and pull more of our city into poverty. Rent hikes will become the new Section 21 and an easy way to remove renters from their homes. High rents will continue to cost the council via the ever-increasing temporary accommodation bill and discretionary housing payments. Landlords continue to profit while the rest of us are losing out, and we need the council to take urgent action on this crisis. Building more social homes is key, but we also need urgent intervention to make sure that renters don't lose their homes due to unaffordable rents. The solution that we need is rent controls. The Bristol Living Rent Commission was formed in 2022, and its recommendations, including supporting the introduction of rent controls in Bristol, were endorsed at full council in March 2024. However, work on this in the council has stalled when we more than ever need to see urgent action on tackling high rents. The Commission Task and Finish Group have not met since March 2025, despite strong support from commissioners for continuing this work. And we urge the council to urgently reinstate the Living Rent Commission Task and Finish Group, continue the work of lobbying national government for rent control powers, and bring communities together to design what rent controls could look like for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. And our next statement is from Dan Aykroyd. Dan.
Democracy requires accountability. In fact, accountability is the very point of democracy. To make decisions and then to assess whether those decisions were right and hold the people who made the decisions accountable for them. In the 2 years since the Barton House evacuation, multiple overlapping failures of governance at Bristol Council surrounding the Housing Department have been revealed. The Barton House evacuation review should be looking into some of these governance failures, in particular the complete lack of a plan of how to carry out an evacuation made the whole ordeal much worse than it needed to be. But I have very little doubt that you're going to let these issues, governance issues, be examined, are you? I think this is a mistake. The terrible governance of this council under the previous administration is going to take years to fix still, and has left this council without the capability to hit the 2030 energy efficiency goals or to fix people's mouldy homes in a reasonable time. Without examination of the failures of governance that happened before the change to the committee model, people aren't going to understand who to blame for the problems at this council, and so they're going to blame this administration.
Thank you very much, Dan. So that's the last of our public statements. So that concludes public forum. And I'd really like to thank members of the public for attending today, and please do stay if you can for the rest of the meeting. We've got a packed agenda, which we're now going to move on to, and I just wanted to make members and officers aware that because we have so many items of business to get through today, I'm going to try and keep everyone to no more than about 15 minutes. So I'm going to request that everyone practice extreme restraint and concision if you're able. And it may mean, unfortunately, members, I might not be able to get through all of your questions for every item if we really are pressing for time. So, agenda item 7 is the Finance Update Report, which presents the Housing and Landlord Services Financial Forecast at period 5 against the approved budget as at the end of June 2025. It's for noting, and I'd like to introduce Martin Johnson as our finance business partner for Housing and Landlord Services, and he's going to be outlining this report for us. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. The Period 5 Finance Update reports on the revenue and capital forecast positions of both General Fund Housing and the HRA. I'd just like to say members of the committee will have noticed that the format of the report for Period 5 has changed from previous versions. This is as a result of the requirement to follow the corporate reporting template for Strategy and Resources Committee. However, following feedback after drafting the report, it has been agreed with Section 151 that we will continue to draft and present reports to Homes and Housing Delivery Committee in the format in which they are familiar and that has been developed over the last 16 months. So onto the report itself. General Fund revenue shows a forecast overspend of 0.9 million and capital an underspend of 10.8 million. The HRA revenue forecast position is a 1.3 million overspend and capital underspend of 7.4 million against a revised budget of 184 million. The reasons for this forecast over and unders are detailed within the report, the main points of which I will cover now. But just to recap, whilst the main report does comment on movements, it refers to movements from Period 2, being the last report that Strategy and Resources Committee had sight of. However, Period 4 was previously reported to this committee in September, and so the following commentary highlights the differences between Periods 4 and Periods 5. So, General Fund revenue, the overspend position of 0.9 million is an increase of 0.8 million against Period 4. This is in large part due to a previously reported risk relating to the under-provision of budget for temporary accommodation subsidy loss, arising due to an error during the budget setting exercise. The cause of this error has been identified and corrective action has been taken to include these sums in the 26-27 budget. This pressure is offset by forecast savings against salaries within the private sector housing team. A potential risk in respect of the impact of the Renters' Rights Bill and welfare reform remains, and as yet there is still insufficient sector intelligence to determine a possible impact. There is also a further opportunity which could mitigate this overspend in relation to potential over-delivery of some savings and use of some grant. On General Fund capital, the full variance in the General Fund capital position is against the Housing Delivery Programme. The 10.8 million of slippage is an increase over Period 4 of 4.3 million, which consists of an increase of 1.7 million against Philwood Public Realm and 0.2 million decrease in slippage for Philwood Cultural Hub. Both of these schemes are supported by the Levelling Up Fund, and the revised positions and delivery timetables have been agreed with MHCLG. Southmead Regeneration Master Framework has seen delays in the conclusion of the final SIL agreement between the Council and Southmead Development Trust, resulting in 2.2 million of slippage. And the Active Communities Multi-Use Games Area, or MUGA, is reporting 0.6 million of slippage against alternative delivery, whilst alternative delivery proposals are developed. HRA revenue is forecasting an overspend of 1.3 million. This is an increase of 1.7 million since Period 4. The main movements between periods relate to an increase in expected implementation costs of the new housing management system as a result of enhanced compliance and reporting requirements and delays to the go-live date. Though I'm pleased to say that the system went live as of this Monday. These costs account for 1 million of additional spend, with a further 0.2 million of overs and unders across supervision and management. In addition, the previously reported risk around depreciation is now crystallised and has been incorporated into the forecasts, resulting in a further increase in costs of 1.5 million. There's also been a reduction to previously forecast underspend on utilities within special services of 0.4 million. These overspends are offset by a reduction to the Waking Watch forecast of 1 million and a further reduction of 0.3 million against borrowing costs, which we continue to monitor in light of higher than budgeted year-end balances. It's worth noting, since the close of Period 5, we have become aware of a further increase in service charge income, which will significantly offset the P5 overspend position. This came to light after reports had been drafted, but are included within the Period 6 report that will come to committee. Most of the previously identified risks have now been included within the forecasts, so have been removed from the risks and ops log. A small residual risk of 0.1 million remains. On HRA capital, HRA 1, the Home Improvement Programme, is showing an underspend for the year of 13.4 million. This is an increase in slippage of 3.2 million over period 4. It is made up by a reduction of slippage of 0.3 million relating to energy efficiency works at Little Cross House, offset by an increase in slippage of 0.6 million relating to windows and replacements. There has also been a reduction in the previously reported overspend on structural remediation works at St Jude's of 1 million, works at Rope Walk House of 0.3 million, and 0.8 million of SHDF works on easy forms. The HRA development programme is forecasting slippage of 19.7 million, an increase of 22.6 million over period 4. This is due to slippage on the Brunel Ford, Branwhite, Edderoth, Romney House, Leinster Avenue, Greville and Cameron Centre sites, totalling 22.8 million, as well as an underspend of 1.9 million on street acquisitions, which will be used to cover overspends on the Philwood Cinema and 96 to 98 West Street projects. The new IT system is also seeing increased capital costs in the region of 0.6 million in relation to additional implementation team costs and new handheld device requirements. Capital receipts at period 5 for the HRA had received 6.4 million of capital receipts and remain on course to exceed its target for the year of 8.4. However, as previously reported, the driver for this remains an increased volume of right-to-buy sales. With the approval of the asset valuation policy, the HRA is now in a position to begin consideration of the disposal of other assets. At present, whilst none have yet been disposed of, 14 are in the process of being assessed through the criteria laid out in the policy. As a result of the change in the mix of receipts from the budget, the mix of capital financing will need to be kept under review during the course of the year, though the current expectation is that borrowings will be reduced in order to utilise increased 141 and other capital receipts. Despite the reported overspend at period 5, the HRA remains compliant with its covenants, albeit currently with little to no headroom against the interest cover ratio. And in summary, whilst the HRA is currently forecasting an overspend, mitigating actions have been identified and works underway to deliver them. As a result of this, there is no immediate concern over compliance with covenants for the current year. I will now take any questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. So I'm going to go to questions, and I'm going to go to Councillor Logan first.
Thank you, Barry. I'm going to demonstrate my extreme precision, non-time wasting by just asking about one thing, which is the NEC system. So increase of cost to over £1 million, that is a lot of money. And it will be one thing if that's a one and done cost and everything's now working perfectly and it's implementing as expected. My understanding is that's not quite right, because the system, I think, has more partially been implemented. I think there are some elements of the system that haven't gone live, and there was in particular, concern to me was that the home choice element was down and then hasn't been migrated. So that might imply to me that there would be additional costs going forward. So will we be updated on the cost to implementation to the point of complete implementation?
Yeah, we'll have an opportunity to talk a bit more about the NEC system later on, but I'm going to ask Sonia to respond to those questions now.
So the cost increases are indicative of what we think the final cost will be to get all of it implemented. But as you know, the delivery of NEC is significantly overdue, so I think we're about 2 years late. So actually, as soon as we've finished implementing all of it, and we have now implemented 2 elements of it, I won't give too much detail away because it'll steal my thunder for later, but we will then need to go immediately into the upgrade. so that we can get some of the additional functionality for the new e-system, particularly around compliance. But actually that should help us, because at the moment we are paying for a third-party system, Compliance 365. So actually we will be trying to get as much of the data as possible into NEC. But the budget pressure is in year and reflects what we think the total cost will be.
Thanks. Do you have a follow-up to that, Rob, before I move on? Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Eddy next.
Very efficiently, Rob's already dealt with one of my questions. But can I say, Martin, it's a great relief to see that we can go back to your time-tested financial reporting. Obviously, both members and the social housing regulator think that's important. And clearly, the exec director's powers of persuasion are very impressive. And I won't engage with Sonia, with you, in an arm wrestling contest. Could I just say, we understand the overspend and the response repairs, including damp and water. We've heard about that already, of course. Although it's not directly actually mentioned, we see in the agenda later on the success, not just in human terms, but in financial, in achieving the savings and exceeding the savings in Paul Sylvester's Tackling Homelessness project. And I think we need to remember that. The two things I was going to ask, you do mention schemes which have not delivered savings, and on page 27, supporting people in TA and modular housing projects, you've got confidence has dipped slightly in both. That doesn't really help me. What is our concern?
I'm going to ask Sonia to respond to that.
I was going to cover this actually in the risk report under the Tackling Homelessness programme. So the MMC lease back is just about getting the leases in place, and I think from memory it's about 250 units. And we've just agreed some legal advice on getting those done. So essentially it's just the delay has been predominantly about agreeing the model leases on there. But we still have confidence in delivering them. It's just that we've pushed some of that work out. I think probably our area of concern is probably the preventative work as part of the Tackling Homelessness programme. So there are really two elements to it. The reducing subsidy loss and the cost of TA, I think we're making really significant progress on, and we're ahead of target in terms of savings. But the work and the investment we've made around prevention, we're not yet seeing the anticipated savings from that. So the team are looking again at that element of the programme and looking to see what additional work we need to do there, particularly given some of the challenges potentially around renters' rights and the opportunity for landlords to exit the market.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, and thank you, Martin. I was able to find the capital figures that I was looking for. Thank you. I note that on the capital works, there's kind of delay in capital spend, partly linked to the building safety regulator acting as a delaying factor in these capital works. I'm just wondering what sort of measures are being taken to. I mean, basically, the building safety regulator should be looking after safety, and it's slowing down the implementation of safety measures. So I just wondered what actions are being taken to address that. Thank you.
Who'd like to respond to that? Claire? I'm going to ask Claire Gibb to respond.
Thank you, Chair. We are lobbying via WECA and a MHCLG. I never get that right. In addition, we've now got a contact courtesy of Homes England with the building safety regulator, and we're starting to talk with them to say what's an example of best practice. So the new approach is to dovetail how we provide assurance for our residents into our application for gateways 1 and 2. And initial discussions with the regulator indicate that is their preferred way forward. We do have to highlight that the regulator themselves has resource issues, which is why gateway approvals are taking longer than the statutory timelines at the moment.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to go Councillor Bales next.
It says in the report, General Fund Housing is seeing a pressure on 0.9 million, primarily driven by a recent uncovered issue at budget setting. Could you provide some more details? I'm sorry if you've already answered that, but everything's been so quick today. So could you give, if you've already answered it, could you just relay what you said?
It is a bit of an involved answer. Might it be easier to take it offline and have a conversation with it, because it is quite involved. Okay.
Is that okay? Okay, great. I'm going to go to Councillor Shabalala next.
Thank you. I think this is both for Claire and for Martin. Just based on and just following up on what Councillor was saying here, Jerome, I think I'd like to see a bit more detail on our slippage. So in terms of both project management and risk assessment, it touches on both finance and risk assessment. Actually getting a breakdown of where we have the biggest risk or challenges, other contractors, regulation, project management and costs. So when looking at the risk register, to really actually put those into each project so we can see where the challenges are. I think you've articulated it here, but as a risk register, and going back to what Martin was saying, I really prefer the old reporting style. This reporting has kind of thrown me a bit from the way I was expecting the documents. But I'd really like the project management approach in providing the finance and the risk assessment to really, let's get into each contract to understand what is the gaps so that we can see what we need to mitigate. Where is our biggest risk coming from? Currently, we're just getting an overall of the issue, but we're not getting the clear understandings, because if we understand each of those, I think we can find ways of reducing certain barriers. Yeah, so I don't have much, it's not a question, but it's just more of a consideration on how you present that information with a bit more detail, really.
Could I just clarify what the ask is there? So you would like to see that in the written report going forward?
Yes, so in the report, instead of just saying slippage, can you put what is the slippage issue? You already do mention it, but in a risk assessment approach, so in your risk assessment document, we don't necessarily see the risk assessment of those projects in that way, like you used to do it before. Plus, you used to actually put what the actions were.
Yeah.
I just like the previous reporting.
Okay. I think Sonia would like to come in on this.
So we can certainly have a look at that. I guess my concern is obviously we have a significant number of contracts, both in terms of the delivery of the capital programme, and the other area of slippage is often our approach to house building in terms of, our own HRA development programme. That would be a significant amount of operational detail. But what I think we can do is we can improve the narrative on here to give some key themes. So, for example, I know that one of the challenges we have in our HRA development programme is we tend to be developing quite small sites. And so what tends to lead to delays quite often is small things like party wall discussions or issues with boundaries and neighbouring properties. We have a significant number of sites where that will be an issue. So we can certainly draw out some themes. For our HRA delivery programme, in terms of the plan programme, I think there is more work that we can do around the narrative there, but we know that some of it will be linked to building safety regulator consents and delays in work. Yeah. Other elements of it may be contract, so we can advise whether it's contractor capacity.
Yes.
So rather than give you the detail on each of our programs of work, what we can do is improve the narrative to get you the information that you would like.
Whichever way works best for you, just the content would be helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. I'm going to move us on now. So I'm going to read out the officer recommendation in this report, which is that the committee notes on the P5 forecast for housing and landlord services. Thank you, and that's noted. Right. Agenda item 8 is the Q2 corporate risk report. One thing that's probably worth bearing in mind, some of these reports relate to different reporting periods to each other. This report provides an update on our current significant strategic risks relevant to the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee to achieving Council's objectives as set out in our corporate strategy for 2025 to 2030. It summarises progress in managing these risks and actions being taken as at Q2 2025-2026. The report's for noting, and I'm going to invite Sonia Fursland, who's our Interim Executive Director for Housing, to introduce and outline this report. Sonia.
Thank you. So the 4 key areas of risk for us really are outlined in the report. The first one obviously is the failure to successfully implement the Tackling Homelessness programme, and we've touched on this a little bit. So the 2 main strands of that work is the reducing subsidy loss, and actually we're ahead of target in terms of savings in there. Some significant programmes of work include increasing the supply of homes for use as temporary social housing, and we've been doing that in a number of ways. In particular, looking at MMC leaseback, working with some private finance lease as well to try and bring some private sector money into support with this work. But also more critically, we've been going to full business case, something which will come to members about the potential for creating a wholly owned council registered provider whose focus would be on the delivery of temporary social housing, which would have a significant impact on subsidy loss. The area where we have not made the savings and where we have not made progress has definitely been prevention, and we have made investment in housing options, and particularly in the number of roles who are working in the preventative space. So we're going to be doing a deep dive to understand what further actions we need to take to better and make sure that we are doing more to prevent homelessness. That's not to say that we don't prevent homelessness. Actually, we are preventing homelessness, but it's not materialising in terms of savings. And what we are seeing is an increase in a number of people who are approaching us as homeless, and we're seeing our numbers in temporary accommodation increase over time. So there is some further work to be done for us in the preventative space, but we are, one of the things that which we will be looking at in particular is around adult and children's pathways as well into homelessness, and the potential for doing a 12-week systems thinking review, identifying the opportunities that we miss to prevent, and then looking at the waste work that we do, the stuff that adds no value, and then realigning our processes to make them more value driven and improve outcomes for people who are coming to us as homeless, or indeed better still preventing them further upstream. So there is work planned in this area. Otherwise, to be honest, I think we would be looking to reduce the risk score here, because actually, generally speaking, the Tackling Homelessness programme is performing well. The next risk to focus on is our failure to enable and maximise the delivery of new affordable housing. I think this is likely to remain a static target, because we know that we've got challenges in the city, particularly around, well, as we heard earlier, the cost of private rents. The demand for housing in the city is really acute. We have 2 universities here. We have 22,000 people on the housing waiting list. The way that we are, the enabling team is where they're focused in terms of managing this risk is working with the 3 distinct groups in terms of how we deliver homes. So one is obviously our own HRA house building programme, which continues. The other is the work that we do with registered providers, and we recently held an engagement event with registered providers and private developers, which is the third element, to understand what are the things that we could improve to enable more homes built in the city. And actually the enabling team have a really strong relationship with our registered providers and with our private house builders as well, and working with colleagues in economy and place as well. We are there is a lot of activity going on in this area, but this is an area where, given the acute need for housing in the city, I think we're unlikely to see the risk score do anything other than hopefully remain static. We've talked a little bit about the next one, which is the failure to manage and evidence compliance with the Building Safety Act. And one of the key things, I guess the key actions there for us really is ensuring that we get that relationship right with the Building Safety Regulator and we meet their requirements. We haven't been called in by the Building Safety Regulator as of yet. To demonstrate that we are compliant, but we are working to ensure that when that happens, that we will be in a position to do that. So what's key to that is building the building safety cases for the 50+ high-rise residential buildings that we have, and work is underway and progress is being made there. The other key element, obviously, is the removal of the combustible material from our high-rise residential buildings. And we recently brought a paper to members here at committee outlining our approach to working with Turner and Townsend. We have subsequently been having discussions with Turner and Townsend because I was very conscious that that committed us to delivering the removal of all of that material and replacement by 2031. But actually we have had a look to see whether we can expedite that further to meet the government target of, I want to say 2029. And we believe we can. So we'll be bringing a further update in relation to that, so that we can truncate those works and actually get that work done more quickly than anticipated. And obviously that work is supported by grant from Homes England. The final one is which is a risk which has materialised, which is why it's our highest scoring one, is around the Consumer Standards Programme. And I don't plan to go into detail that now because we've got a report coming up. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. I'm going to open the floor to questions, and I'm going to begin with Councillor Bales.
So I'm a little bit concerned about a vacant HMO in my ward. It's been vacant for quite a long time. It's an old former pub. Now, when it was going through planning, we called it in, and it went through anyway. There were lots of concerns raised by the community, and all of the concerns that were raised are all of the reasons why the council are now saying that they can't find a use for it. So it did have a provider in there originally. They pulled out quite some time ago. So now we've got this 22-bedroom HMO that nobody in the community wanted. It's sat there empty, and I've met and I've spoken to the owner several times, and it's there now. We can't turn it back into a pub, and he's willing to work with the local authority to find a use, even if it's temporary accommodation for vulnerable people to prevent homelessness. So, what can we do about that? Because, it's such an amazing space. It's absolutely massive. It's all brand new. So if we really do want to tackle homelessness, there's a perfect opportunity there.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. Sonia, do you want to respond to that?
So, Councillor, if you're happy to provide the details to me, I can certainly have a look at it. One of the things that we've been doing recently has been working with adult social care, because they have some significant accommodation pressures as well. And actually we've been looking to see how we can support them in securing accommodation to reduce their subsidy loss issues as well. So if you pass the information on to us, we can have a look and see whether there are any potential uses.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Thomas next.
Thank you. And that's quite a clear and really helpful overview. I mean, on the prevent side, it feels like there's some kind of repositioning that's needed. So it's a sort of, what's in terms of a kind of report around it. It would be good to see something that covered, what's going well, what's not going well, what do we think is possible given what we now have found out with the spend. What is the spend? and where do we think we can get to, and is there more learning that can take place from what's happening elsewhere around the country? Because I think part of the reasoning around Prevent was that there were some very good positive experiences elsewhere in the country. So what is it that we haven't been able to do, for example, that Manchester has?
Yeah, thanks, Jerome. Sonia, would you like to respond?
I will, but I may bring Paul in as well.
Yeah.
What I wouldn't like to do is to give to the committee the impression that we're not doing any prevention. Paul and the team are doing a significant amount of prevention. The challenge, I think, with these targets is that as much as we prevent, if we're seeing increasing demand, that is a bit of a challenge. I know that Paul is probably going to say as well that actually you do work very closely with a number of the other cities to find out what they're doing, but I'm not going to put words into your mouth, Paul.
Yeah, go for it, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. So we're always looking outside to see who's doing what and what we can do differently. We meet with core cities every 2 months, where we mine each other for information around what we're doing and what's been working well. I mean, it was straying into the reports coming on a bit later, but what I will say is last year in 24-25, the increase in temporary accommodation in Bristol was the lowest across all core cities, but things changed, and this year things have gone in the wrong direction, partly because of demand. So there is though more that we can do, and I'd be very happy to explain that in more detail at a later point. Yeah.
Thanks. And I think probably one of the things that I'd highlight related to that as well is that the housing market in Bristol is quite different to some of our other core cities. And as we heard earlier, we've got some of the very highest rents outside of London, and so what works in other cities doesn't necessarily work in the same way here. Although we are learning from other cities, we're also looking to see what we can learn and develop here in Bristol. You had a follow-up.
Yeah, I think the other thing I wanted to pick up was, I mean, you talked about the kind of capacity building approach, Sonia. I think there's also the question of private sector developers. I mean, it's kind of partly links into what I think Kerry was saying, sitting on large unfinished developments, moving them forward at quite slow pace. So the development, for example, on Festival Way, which must be kind of 400 homes. I mean, maybe it's fewer than that, but it seems to be going at snail's pace. So, and developers, the high volume house builders will do what is necessary to maximise their profits, not what is necessary to get homes available for people fast. So I think what is the engagement that we can have with the volume house builders around the supplies that they can bring to market as fast as possible? I think certainly that needs to be an extra strand, even if we don't get very far with it.
Thanks, Jerome. Conscious of time, so I'm gonna take Councillor Gooch and then Councillor Eddy, and then move us on.
Okay, it's something that I keep thinking, because there's a couple of items on the agenda that this touches on, which is the contractors, as it's just been alluded to. I just feel that what we've got is a failure of the to deliver what we need. So I'm just thinking whether we can actually work cross portfolio here. There's an opportunity to work with skills, with WECA maybe, to see about working towards getting our own housing, a building company, actual contractor, where we can try, do apprenticeships, schemes, go into schools, get kids interested in building, and work towards actually having our own building company, because the contractors are not delivering for us. They're holding up projects. It's more expensive, it's slow. There's just such a shortage of builders, and we need to be training people in all the trades. And we as a council really should be driving this, and I'm just wondering if this is something that we can actually maybe put onto the agenda and from the time or something to look at.
Thanks, Carolyn. I think that this would be something for the Economy and Skills Committee to consider. So I'm going to propose that you take it to that committee and ask them to programme it onto their agenda. And I'm going to go to Councillor Eddy next, and then I'll be wrapping this
To be
item up.
helpful to Caroline, I serve on the Economy and Skills Development Viability Task Finish Group, and this was raised, I think, at our penultimate meeting, and certainly the industry expressed concern that WECA seemed to be utterly ignoring the issue of skills in the construction industry. So Councillor Andrew Brown has taken that on board and is due to contact them. But the reason I wanted to hone in on this report was to do with delay to the ERIDUF programme. One site is in Ryclose in Highridge in my ward, and it particularly concerns me because we've sold it very much to local people. In being modular construction, it should be quicker, and we can develop smaller, more landlocked sites. But also we put in place temporary road parking restrictions. So what reassurance can you give me that we're seeking to unblock progress here?
Thank you, Richard. Sonia, do you want to respond?
So apologies, Councillor. My knowledge of the Erida site and the history of it is probably not what it needs to be to give you a detailed answer. What I can say is that I think a lot of the delay was getting on site, and actually I think once they got onto site, which I think from memory would have been about May or June time, because I think we went and visited, and I do know that actually the units were coming off the production line actually I think around about the 8th or the 9th of October. So actually I think a lot of the delay was start on site rather than start on site. So the actual MMC bit of it actually has been relatively quick. But what I will do is certainly ask Louise Davison, our head of service, to do a response on that in terms of what is the learning and what would we do differently.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move us on. I'm going to read out the officer recommendation, which is simply that the committee notes the report. And looking around, I think we can take it that it's been noted. So, agenda item 9 is the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme and Compliance Update, which provides an opportunity for the committee to both note and comment on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme as a whole, the latest Landlord Compliance Performance Report, the Residents' Voice Actions, feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel, our AWAB's Law Preparedness Review Action Plan, the Asbestos Safety Review, and the update from the latest regulatory review meetings that we've had with the Regulator of Social Housing. The report's for noting. I'm going to ask Sonia Fersland to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you. Apologies, I'm just trying to get on the right page. But while I find the document itself, I think it's worth just giving the little bit of the background here, but I know members will be very familiar with it, which is that we self-reported ourselves to the regulator in April 2024, and in July 2024 received a regulatory grade of C3, which meant that we were a service with serious failings that required significant improvement. And as a result of those failings, we put in place a consumer standards programme, and that has been operational now for some time. And actually we are, as of today, at the deadline for milestone 1. And to remind members, milestone 1 was that we would understand our position, we would do a root cause analysis, we would understand what actions we needed to take, and we would have a plan in place essentially to address that. The report outlines, the report that obviously was written at a point in time. Much of this stuff is moving at pace, and one of the key elements, I think, of delivering on Milestone 1 was the implementation of NEC. So this report was drafted before then, and obviously we have gone live with NEC for housing management and for property on Monday and Tuesday of this week. We've been operating a reduced repairs, but we go live with full repairs service today. But that is a significant milestone in terms of where we're at. As you can see, in terms of achieving Milestone 1, we were generally ahead of target, but there were some areas which were behind target. But in terms of a bit of an update on those, actually we feel that when we come to do the review of Milestone 1, which we'll likely be doing in about a week's time, we feel reasonably confident that we will be in a position to say to you at next committee that we have achieved our milestone and are on track for Milestone 2, the deadline of which is December. And we're really driving delivery of that. We're meeting weekly, much in the same way as we've done with the NEC programme now, to drive delivery and to ensure we're focused on it. So in terms of where some of the actions that we were behind, and to provide a bit of an update, obviously one of them was the NEC programme. We've now gone live. The other one was around having data frameworks in place and agreed. They are now in place and are being rolled out. And the other was around our asset compliance and data analysis. And we are where we thought we would need to be. We're about 40% of our data now within 5 years, and Savills are doing a review on that data for us. Our hope is still to get to 70% by the end of this financial year, and we have onboarded another contractor to assist us with that work. Obviously, a key element has been the backlog of repairs, and a particular focus, obviously, this week in relation to damp and mould. So certainly in January 25 this year, we had a significant backlog of damp and mould with 4,137 cases. And we are now looking at a backlog still too high, but significant improvement of 1,890 cases that we still need to resolve. We did have a report from Box Rocket which looked at our readiness for AWAB's law. We have a plan in place, and that plan has been delivered. We have a new contractor who's been onboarded, and we are confident that through the process changes that we've made and the work that we're putting in place, that we are in a good position to meet our obligations under AWAB's law. But what's really important, because that's all about new cases, is, as we've seen today, is that we continue to make progress on dealing with the backlog in relation to damp and mould.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And I think before I open up for questions from members, there's a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. So the first was around the implementation of NEC and the new IT system that we're moving to. Now, as part of that, residents who are using the home choice system to bid for properties may have encountered some disruption. So I was wondering whether you could just give us a bit of an update on what disruption there's been and what people can expect to see over the next few weeks and months.
Can we take Paul?
Yeah, Paul, I'm going to ask you to do that.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so both the home choice and the homelessness parts of the new system didn't go live at the same time as other colleague services did. We had a issue with the home choice data. And as you appreciate, it's so important that we get everything right so that when we go live, everybody's in a position where they can band and we're housing the people according to our policies. We don't think we're that far off, but we really didn't think it was the right thing to do to go live with these errors. We appreciate that it's caused a bit of distress because the system has been down for 2 weeks and people have been unable to bid. But what we did do in advance of that is we made sure that all the housing partners, ourselves and the housing landlords that we work with, the housing associations, advertise as many properties as possible in advance of the downtime so that people could still bid and express an interest. So what we've done is we've reverted back to the existing system, our current system, so properties will continue to be advertised from next week on that as we plan to go live for these modules.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight was around the introduction of AWAB's law this week. So AWAB's law provides new rights to residents living in our homes and in social homes owned by other providers. We have been taking whatever opportunity we can, really, to inform our residents about the new rights that they have under this law, and what they can expect us to do when they report to us issues around damp and mould in their home. So I wonder whether this might be a good forum as well for us to just give a quick update. I think it would be helpful for members as well on very, very broadly what you can now expect from us as a council if you're experiencing damp and mould in one of our homes. Claire, would you like to do that? Thank you.
There are a series of, thank you, Chair, sorry. There are a series of legislative targets that we have to meet. When we receive a report, we have 24 hours in which to carry out an inspection, and we have 10 days in which to let the householder know the cause of their damp and mould. We've done a lot of work to do training and damp and mould awareness. It's a statutory training course for all housing professionals, and it's available for the wider council on the e-learning module. But more importantly, we have got the damp and mould report, which gives us a series of risk categories, and the management response and operational high-level plan is included in your papers. We have a new contractor on board because one of the things that we agreed as a team, that when we get a report, we have to remove the immediate hazard, irrespective of where the cause of damp and mould is happening and whether or not it's to do with lifestyle or fuel poverty or a fabric issue. So removing the hazard is a zero tolerance policy, which is a step change for us in response to AWAB's law. The response within 10 days, so that we tell the resident why there is damp and mould, and we give practical, sensible advice to demonstrate if it's fuel poverty, can we signpost to services that can help? If it's because of the fabric of the building being thermally inefficient, we have to then have that monitored. And we've got VoiceScape, which is an automatic monitoring protocol that auto dials or uses the phone system to say, do you still have problems, so that we can check as the weather gets colder in winter, where our caseload is expected to increase. The last thing we're doing in order to be proactive is we're seriously looking at monitoring systems, and we are trying to negotiate a free issue of some light bulbs, which we are told will kill damp and mould spores. I will believe that if it happens, but if I can get it for free, we'll try it. But the accountability and the need to promote the route to report and what individuals are entitled to do under the law is being included in our newsletters. I think, Councillor Parson, you're doing a blog on it. And the main change is that we cannot just rock up every so often and wash down. We have to establish why it's happening. That will probably give us, in association with our stock condition surveys, a much better idea of how our stock is used, as well as the physical condition of the stock. So We are treating this as an opportunity to improve customer service.
Thank you, Claire. I'm going to go to questions, and I'm going to begin with Councillor Stone.
Okay, thank you very much. My question is really is about the amount of, and I think you probably know what I'm going to say, the amount of capped gas supplies there are. In the report, it says there are 360 capped gas supplies. I think there's 176 that have been capped for more than 3 months. And I know that Claire and I have had conversations about this over the last week or so. What I'd like to know is whether or not we will be implementing policies where we work with the Centre for Sustainable Energy, because they work in partnership with energy companies which provide gas engineers top-up cards. So we remove the fuel poverty at that point. Okay, so which will allow our gas engineers to make those gas checks which are legally necessary, and therefore we do not have to we do not have to cap off the gas, because a cold home leads to damp and mould. So this is obviously it's future-proofing and removing those risks and hazards. Can I have assurance that that policy is going forward, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Claire, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also for the time and effort with our correspondence, because it is something that the senior leadership team have been concerned about for some time. We have currently 356 capped occupied properties, one of which we lease from a third party, but we have full maintaining and repairing responsibilities, and the other 2 the individuals have applied to buy. But our responsibility as a landlord is that we have 356 incidents where we have an occupier and a capped gas property. We have started to look at the top-up prepaid meter cards to get the servicing done. However, there's a series of properties that have been brought to my attention from yourself and also from other advocacy groups that we have arranged case history meetings on with colleagues in housing and also with the adult social care, because we are concerned that we have let down these vulnerable people. In addition, I'm looking at technical options, for example, changing out a gas boiler for an electrical boiler, because there are systems that cost the same to operate, but Bristol's hard water gives me cause for concern. So yes, in short, this is a priority and it's not acceptable, and we want to work to get a plan back to committee to explain what we're going to do about it.
Can I just come back on that? So sure. I just want to be very clear that part of that, and thank you very much for that. That was I like to hear. Swapping out a gas boiler for an electric boiler is another way forward. However, the Centre for Sustainable Energy will take on they will pay for that top up of gas, because they work with the energy suppliers. So if we're not working with them in partnership, which we can clearly just go forward with this, can we just make it that policy that we work with the Centre for Sustainable Technology and just do exactly that tomorrow?
Thanks. Mark Kemp's going to respond to that one.
Hello. Yes, we're reviewing the gain access policy and gas policy, and I think that's something that we can absolutely put in part. It won't be part of the policy, but it will be part of the process. But yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Shabalala next, and then I'm very sorry, but I'm not doing very well at managing time at the moment, so I think I'm going to propose that we move on to the next item after that, if that's okay, because we've got a lot of business to get through, including some key decisions.
Thanks for the opening, Sonia. I think it is very important that we understand the position so that we can ensure that we have the right capacity to actually deal with the actions and implement the right plans. However, my heart is literally in tears just to actually try and comprehend what was the previous approach to supporting the safety for our residents. When I meet residents in Redcliffe and in Kingsdown, and I'm sure for many other councillors where you meet your residents, people want to go look for work, but they can't look for work because there's literally water coming down their roofs. And this is what I've been faced with consistently. So no matter what aspirational things families are trying to address, they can't ignore the state of their homes. So back to what one of the guests today said, I'd really like a review to understand what on earth was going on before, because this doesn't need to be an ombudsman on the council to ensure that people are actually getting their money's worth or they're actually living in safe and proper housing. It doesn't need to be an ombudsman. But this only seems to, and people would say, you're only doing this because now there's an ombudsman. Well, that was then, this is now, right? So I'm sure without an ombudsman, we'll still be doing that. But I'm trying to understand what was going on before, because this is just not acceptable. So I'd like to actually ask if you can put a review, recommend, whatever, to really get a clear understanding. Because as these things come up that you're saying you're doing all of this, I'm consistently thinking, so what's been going on before? And I can't continue just having this thought in my head. I write a proper report that says this is what's been going on before. This is why this has been or hasn't been a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Sibs. I think that's a really important challenge. I'm going to ask Sonia to respond.
So I think we have had a number of reviews which have looked at how essentially we've gotten to the position where we're at. The first one I think was the Savills review, which looked at particularly the consumer standards and our failure to meet them, particularly in relation to landlord health and safety. And I think that was a reasonably comprehensive review in terms of helping us understand the position that we're in. The other review, which I think is worth noting as well, which has also previously come to this committee, was the Michael Scorer review in terms of the options for housing. So housing has not been its own directorate. And it has not had the leadership capacity that it has needed, and that came out very clearly from the Michael Scorer review. The creation of the Housing Department in April this year, the changes we've made in leadership in terms of bringing in some additional leadership roles has really had an impact. I think the combination of the Savills review, the Michael Scorer review, all of the reviews that we've had into individual areas of compliance, such as the ION report on asbestos, the Box Rocket report in relation to damp and mould, I think they all build a picture. My concern about doing a further review is it will potentially take, it will take capacity away from doing some of the doing. And I think we know the challenges that we face and the things that we need to do to put it right. But I will be guided by this committee in terms of priorities.
I mean, as you mentioned, maybe they are all separate reviews, but it'd be good if they actually consolidated into one so you can see a clear narrative of what's happened, both in terms of leadership and in terms of staffing and then in terms of the delivery. So whichever way, but if they're all separate reviews, there's just one solid piece of truth would be very useful.
Thanks.
I can use AI, but,
Yeah. Sonia, do you want to respond?
So what we could do is we could go back, we could look at those reviews, we could draw out the key findings from them and any recommendations, and then we can give you a progress update in terms of the changes we've made as a result of those, if that would be helpful, and we can bring that to a future committee.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much. Right, I'm going to move us on. Apologies, I know some people had hands up, but we really have a lot of business today. The Office of Recommendations on this report are to note and comment on the Housing and Consumer Standards Programme update, on the Landlord Compliance Performance Report, the Residents' Voice Actions and Feedback from the Housing Scrutiny Panel, the Awab's Law Preparedness Review Action Plan, the Asbestos Safety Review, and the update from the latest regulatory meetings. I just need to ask the committee to note that report, and then we'll move on. Thank you. So, agenda item 10 is the annual complaints report and improvement plan for 2024-25. So this presents the annual complaints performance and service improvement report for the council's landlord services in line with the Housing Ombudsman's Complaint Handling Code. The report's for noting, and I'm going to ask Mark Kempt to introduce and outline the report. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. So This report forms part of our formal submission to the Housing Ombudsman and demonstrates how Bristol City Council's housing services is meeting the Complaints Handling Code. The report outlines performance against target response times, percentage of complaints upheld and resident satisfaction with complaint handling. Between April 2024 and March 2025, we received 1,562 complaints, 62% of which were responded within 10 days, and time waiting for repairs, 18% was the highest category of complaint classification during that period. In April 2024, the Ombudsman introduced a 10-day response timescale for all registered providers, replacing the previous 15 working days. While we've made progress in improving visibility and accessibility of our complaints process, we recognise that further improvement is needed. Work is underway to review our approach to managing and responding to complaints across the Directorate, ensuring we meet the expectations of the Code and continue to use complaints data to drive service improvements. Welcome any questions.
Thank you very much, Brian. I'm going to go to Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. It's helpful to see this, and I think this partly links into the previous item as well. We're talking about reviews, and now we're talking about the kind of handling of complaints. If we're doing things right first time, we won't get the complaints. So I think how our key performance indicators and our metrics, hopefully with the new NEC system are operating, will tell us how fast complaints are being dealt with, and how fast repairs are being dealt with, which is a major source of complaints. And then knowing that the tenant is happy with the resolution of the repair. And if we've got systems that are in place showing us that, but that's not shown on the action plan. So I think capturing the correct data is really important as part of the action plan. And I think the other thing is it talks about learning, but there's no sense of what the key priorities for learning are. That you're going to be introducing as a result of the complaints. And then I think the final bit is the kind of the condition of the housing stock. So are we going to have a better analysis of the condition of the housing stock, which will tell us how many houses, how many flats have got water coming down the walls or serious damp problems, because then we match that up with our investment programme. So I think it all has to come together in a systems approach, but certainly in terms of the actions, there are some other actions there that do need to be captured.
Yeah. Thanks, Jerome. And I think you're absolutely right to highlight the really sort of central importance of repairs and the condition of people's homes. These things are absolutely sort of the things that we need to get right before our residents are going to have any confidence in us as a landlord. And that's really been the focus for so much of the work that we've done over the last year, hasn't it? And we've made, I think, extraordinary progress in clearing the enormous backlog of repairs that we inherited. And of course, we're undertaking condition surveys now of all of our homes, which wasn't happening before, and that really is giving us the information that we need to be able to invest in that plan programme. I'm going to ask Mark to respond on those points around learning and so forth.
Yeah, I think there's I mean, this is from last year, so there's been some progress made over the last 2 quarters, which isn't in this report. So what we're doing on top of this is providing some segmentation around resident feedback in general, which I talk about in the Task and Finish Group report. So we're looking to amalgamate all the information that we're getting to give us some trend analysis around what residents are saying. So I'm hoping that next year, when I provide this report or an update in the next few committees, I'll be able to provide some more information around what we're doing about that.
Thanks very much. I'm going to go to Kerry and then finish with Richard. So Councillor Bales next.
My question is about the compensation. So if, for example, you complained about repairs and maintenance and it wasn't a council contractor, it was someone outsourced, does the amount there include that? Does that go into that, or is that separate, or how is that worked out?
So the compensation is paid by us as an organisation. So we've got a separate budget which we hold for paying for compensation. I guess what you're suggesting is whether we're going back to the contractor to get that money. I'm not entirely sure, so I'll pass over to Claire if that's all right.
Thank you. Yes, we've started to go back to the external contractor. It was a shock to find out we hadn't been, and it was a shock to understand that we weren't holding them to quality account. I can assure you we are now.
That's great. Thanks very much. Councillor Reddy, and then I'm going to finish up with this item.
My contribution is more of a comment than a question. I mean, no organisation clearly wants to receive complaints, but the officer responsible for this has been very frank with us but bearing in mind we're seeking to engage more to alert our tenants to their rights, we are likely, frankly, to receive an increased number of feedbacks in future years. So it's not purely a comparator with last year and this year, of course. But in my view, I mean, Mark was very frank. It is a work in progress. But, I mean, two things particularly struck home to me. First of all, 87% of complaints are resolved at stage 1. And also, last year, the amount of compensation paid was reduced by almost 40%. On page 118, you list the improvements and he's not here, with respect to Jerome, some learning from complaints, of course. Clearly, more needs to be done, and I probably am like a long playing record, because every PCCB where reports are raised, I say, what are we doing? What procedures are doing to be improved? So I can see progress, as the Chairman has indicated, and I look forward to that being further implemented next year.
Thank you very much. So that concludes this item then. I'm just going to ask members to note the officer recommendation, which is to note the report. And we're going to move on now to agenda item 11, which is the Tenancy Agreement review. So this report seeks approval to adopt new tenancy agreements for Bristol City Council tenants, replacing the existing versions and to ensure that it reflects current legal requirements, service standards and tenant responsibilities. There are 2 tenancy agreements, one introductory for new tenants and one secure. This is a key decision because it affects 2 or more wards, so we'll need to take a vote on this. And I'm going to invite Mark Kempt again to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. The revised agreements reflect current legal legislation and clearer tenant responsibilities, ensuring we remain compliant and responsive. We're under pressure with time, so I'm going to rattle through this. The main reasons for this work are legal changes. So housing law has evolved significantly since 2010, including the Localism Act and new case law. The new agreements reflect these developments. Regulatory compliance. The regulator of social housing introduced the new consumer standards in 2024, requiring greater transparency and resident focus. And thirdly, the language. So we've simplified the wording to improve our understanding for residents. We carried out consultation between June and August 2025 and engaged with community groups and our service user groups during this period. Retaining the old agreement was not considered viable due to legal, financial and operational risks. And moving forward, we plan to hold events in key geographical areas of the city following today's committee. These will be in the areas where we had the highest response rates to clarify the changes and support accessibility with the agreements. And we also plan to meet with key community stakeholders during this time as well. The proposal will be for the new agreements to be launched in early 2026 with a full members briefing in January as well. One of the things we didn't share, which I suddenly realised was a bit silly, was the old tenancy agreement. So I have a copy here if anyone would like to see it, but I'm happy to take any questions.
That's great, thank you, Mark. So I'm going to start with Councillor Stone.
Yeah, so I'd like to say, first of all, I'd like to say really thank you very much, Mark Kemp, for all the hard work that you've put into the revising this tenancy agreement. My only question really is, in the future, would there be a possibility that we could co-produce these type of documents instead of just consulting on them? Because obviously when you consult something and you come up with like the simplicity of the language, that if it's co-produced, we wouldn't have to go through those hoops, would we? So thanks very much for putting the gifting items in there, and that it stands alone under section 4. So I'm personally very happy with it. But if we could co-produce it, that'd be great.
Thanks very much, Lisa. I can imagine there might be some challenges there, obviously, because it being a legal document, and it needs to include certain elements of new legislation and things like that. But I think it would be helpful, actually, Mark, if you're able to respond on first of all, what's the likely sort of timescale for any refresh of the tenancy agreement, and also whether you think there's possibility for co-production in there.
Sure. It's almost as if we planned it. We have the report for Task and Finish Group coming next, and as you'll know, we talked a lot about co-design during that. So that is very much the forefront of our minds as officers now when we make decisions, or we have to make decisions on certain pieces of work. This particular piece of work is obviously a legal document, so there's only so much co-design we could do. However, it's not lost on me that we could have done more around how we share that with residents, what we're sending residents to ensure that it meets their requirements, and whether they have ideas on what we could be doing better with regards to circulating that information. So I think the learning for me is that when we are doing any specific piece of work like this, which is so big, we need to be planning in further earlier on how we can work with residents in designing some of that. Not necessarily the agreement per se, but maybe the documents that surround that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Councillor Bales next.
Obviously, I'm a council tenant myself, as you know, and I always say that, but lots of other council tenants contacted me informally to kind of ask about the letter that went out. So obviously, I sometimes come to these committees, so I understand why the consultation was going ahead and whatnot, but tenants didn't necessarily understand or know why they were suddenly getting this letter. And I'm going to read you, excuse me, I'm going to read you what one of them said, and this is kind of summarises what lots of other tenants thought. So it says, I've been in BCC housing for 14 years. BCC have sent me a consultation letter about my tenancy changes. I'm really suspicious that rents will go up, my tenancy will no longer be indefinite, and changes to who is responsible for repairs, etc. I've tried the consultation link they sent, it doesn't work. I'm concerned that changes will be implemented with no consultation. So that's pretty much, that's just from one person, but that kind of sums up why people were contacting me. So people were really alarmed with the way that letter was worded, and they couldn't get the link to work. So I'm just wondering how effective that consultation was.
Yeah, thank you, Kerry. And I think that's something that I think we saw in the responses to the consultation itself as well. There was quite a bit of anxiety, I think, when people received those letters, and I think that's something that we need to learn from. But Mark, would you like to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we did receive a number of comments exactly like that. I spoke to a number of residents myself personally, just to reassure you on a couple of those points. With regarding rents, that's covered by the rent standards, so CPI plus 1%, so that won't come into play here. I think, as I've just said, there are lessons learned around the language we used and how we did manage that. So all I can say is we'll take this away as learning, and moving forward we'll develop our communications with a more resident focused.
Great, thank you. Councillor Logan.
In the interest of time, Kerry has articulated our concerns
Okay.
more articulated.
Right.
That's absolutely fine. Carry on.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shabalala.
Yeah, just in terms of mobility scooter storage. So in this pack, you mentioned obviously about the regulator, but I think it would be great to also provide reassurance or how we would support residents with the mobility storage. I think that's also important. In terms of the service charge, I think it's also important to highlight where, so if someone is paying that additional service charge, where would they actually see the improvement and what would that be going towards? And I think hopefully maybe within the neighborhood standards that could be better highlighted. But I think just to kind of reassure people what will happen with the service charges and the mobility scooters, I think that would be a bit helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, just to come in on the mobility scooters point, we are introducing a registration process for mobility scooters, so that will be implemented very soon. So, and yeah, I take your point about service charges.
Great. I think we were talking about getting reports and updates earlier. I mean, members of the committee may recall that we approved a new policy around mobility scooters last year, and I think it would probably be a good idea for us to get a bit of an update on the implementation of that policy. So I'm going to ask for that. Councillor Eddy.
Very briefly, in deference to the chairman, of course. Mark, I fully endorse your attempt to, well, not your attempt, your success in making the agreements fit for purpose in the 21st century. That's fine. But we all know, of course, that obviously upholding the tenancy condition depend on the procedures and policies we have behind that. So obviously that needs to be delivered and enforced by management.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Thomas next.
I note the requirement that if people want to store e-bikes in their property, that they need to seek permission. Is that kind of happening? Because I'm aware that the problems with fires related to e-bikes are unlicensed conversions, kind of home conversions, rather than high quality kind of consumer bikes. So given the sort of the benefits of e-bikes, I would be concerned if there was a blanket veto on high quality e-bikes.
Sorry, I just assumed that I could speak. Sorry, Chair. E-bikes and lithium battery fires are a significant concern in terms of fire safety. However, mobility scooters actually are less of a concern because they're usually through disability access schemes. So it is a piece of work that we're going to do to try and capture what we have, risk assess it, and then have an access and an equitable policy, because taking away somebody's scooter or e-bike is sometimes challenged.
That's right, and we want to promote responsible use of e-bikes in the city. So it's a huge benefit in terms of health and in terms of savings for people and in terms of carbon savings.
Great. Thanks very much. Right. I'm not seeing any more hands. Did anyone else have anything? I think we're good. So I'm going to move us on to the vote now. The officer recommendations in this report are that the committee approves the adoption and implementation of the new tenancy agreement and also the adoption and implementation of the new secure tenancy agreement. I'd also like to ask you to note the consultation report at Appendix F. So I'm gonna move these recommendations. There are 2 recommendations for approval and 1 for noting. Are members happy if we take all 3 at once? Great. Okay. So I move those recommendations, and I'd like to ask for a seconder. Councillor Eddy, thank you very much. So I'm going to ask members to indicate your vote clearly by hand. And first, could I ask for votes for the recommendation? Okay, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And can I ask for votes against the recommendation? And that's none. And can I ask if there are abstentions? And that's 2. Thank you very much. So I declare that that vote has passed. And we're going to move on to agenda item 12, which is an update from the Resident Engagement Task and Finish Group. This report presents the recommendations from the Homes and Housing Delivery Resident Engagement Task and Finish Group and some proposed changes to the Council's approach with regards to formal resident engagement. It's a non-key decision, but I'm still going to ask for you to note the report and support the recommendations within it later on. So I'm going to invite Mark Kempt again to introduce and outline this report. And following that, I'm going to ask Councillor Shabalala, who chaired the Task and Finish Group, to make a few comments as well. So, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the report outlines a refreshed approach to our formal resident engagement across Bristol City Council's housing services. Just wanted to point out that the work directly supports our compliance with the housing consumer standards, particularly around the resident voice. The Task and Finish Group met 5 times and engaged with residents, housing scrutiny panel members and community stakeholders. The resulting recommendations aim to embed the resident voice into service delivery, co-design and governance. The key proposals include a new resident and community panel to replace the Housing Management Board, co-designing a resident voice strategy and resident engagement strategy with residents, introducing localised engagement models at block, estate and neighbourhood levels, removing barriers to participation through incentives such as childcare, ICT access and recognition schemes, and promoting positive narratives through resident-led storytelling and content. I would personally like to thank the committee for working with me and other colleagues on this report. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, I mean, my thanks as well to all the officers, all the members, all of our members of our partner organisations and residents who took part in this. It was done over a very compressed timescale, actually, in order to meet the initial milestone for the Housing and Consumer Standards programme, which this work very much feeds into. So yeah, extremely grateful to everybody involved, and I'd like to ask Councillor Shabalala to say a few words about it as well.
Yeah, he took the words out my mouth. Definitely, I think the involvement of staff during that August kind of holiday time was really key. And involvement of our residents was also really critical, and also for our voluntary sector organizations. I guess as a resident, a few things that I'm really happy about in terms of this strategy is that it provides a mandate across all of our estates, and therefore providing a consistency of approach that residents can find a sense of relief and reassurance of elements of communication, positive stories, co-creation, and increasing participation, which is really key to getting residents' voices heard, and to actually take the actions that residents have said, of which there's the action plan. And the beauty of the action plan, it's bite-sized chunks of work that can be done and will be done in terms of small, medium and large. But what we've actually kind of jigged that to is a timeline of which then, residents can kind of hold us accountable to when those things should be delivered. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing an increase of resident engagement through individual estates, through wards, and also to kind of thank Leisha and Liz and Mark for the efforts, because now that work will become very clear and evident as residents want to engage both online and offline to get their voices heard. And clearly this work is quite interlinked with everything that we've been discussing today, in terms of compliance, in terms of the Arabs law, in terms of resident engagement and the satisfaction. All of that is alignment. So it's really good to see that the cogs are singing, or we're all singing on one hymn sheet, and we're moving forward in a very cohesive and productive way. So thank you very much for the time and effort spent on this.
Okay. Thanks very much. I'm going to open the floor to questions and comments now. Councillor Bales.
So I'm just looking at the recommendations, and it talks about childcare. So I just want to thank you that that is in there, because it's really, really important, because that is a huge barrier for anybody in the city to engage with any services. And you know, I used to provide childcare for a mental health charity. So you know, without our service, those people that needed that mental health support wouldn't have been able to come and use our service. So it would be the same with anything. So it's really, really important that, you know, that isn't a barrier, because, you know, childcare falls on mostly women. So I just want to point out and thank you that that is in there.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Bales. Yeah, and I think one of the things that very much came out of my experience of that task and finish group was around making sure that we're doing everything that we can to remove barriers to people's participation, you know, including things like access to childcare, you know, support with other caring responsibilities as well. You know, we're recommending that residents should be recompensed for their time in engaging with us, because this is something that takes them away from other activities, and I think that's a really strong theme that's come out, hasn't it, from everything that we've heard. One thing that I wanted to mention actually myself was that when we're thinking about supporting people with things like support with care and travel and so forth, I think we should extend that to representatives of the voluntary and community sectors where appropriate as well, because I think, you know, many of them are also giving up their time to support us in our work. So I'd like to make that recommendation myself. But Mark, would you like to respond about anything that we're going to be doing going forward to try and remove those barriers to participation?
Yeah, we've already started some of the work. So, for example, we've set up a payment gateway, which will allow us to make payments to people who are engaging with us in the future. We've also looked at other organisations to see how they promote and support residents with engagement. And I would just say that some of the actions that are in that action plan have already been completed, which is positive. And I've been out on a couple of visits to meet residents, and I've shared some of the recommendations that are in here before it came to committee, and the feedback I've had has been positive, and that this is the right approach that we're adopting. And yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Thanks very much, Mark. So yeah, I mean, as you said, we'll see how it goes, but I think we want to see some update reporting coming back to this committee, to see how our resident engagement work is progressing, and with the new resident and community panel being introduced, I think there's going to be some we'll be seeing some changes, I think, in how we engage with our residents formally through this committee as well. And there's some recommendations, I think, in the report about that. Mark, did you want to come in again?
I was just going to say, would you like a little update on the panel?
I think that would be great, yes, please.
I'll pass over to Alicia.
Thank you, Alicia.
Hi, Alicia Wilson, Policy and Engagement Manager. Excuse my voice, I've got a bit of a cold. So me and my team have been recruiting to the new resident and engagement panel. We had 33 applicants apply for that, and we've shortlisted about just over 20 applicants for that, and about to do some informal interviews. We've included the community development team to be a part of that, because they are closer to the community and they understand the skill sets or experience of residents and the type of things that they get involved with in their communities, and will help us to make sure we get the right people involved. We have got a lot of motivated tenants who have come forward, and leaseholders, so I'm really pleased about that. And we are in the process of just finalising some of the detail about how the panel will influence going forward and developing a terms of reference, and also, as Mark said, putting a payment scheme together. So we're updating our expenses policy, making sure we include the payment for involvement, and we've also got plans in place for how we compensate our voluntary sector organisations. I think we've got 5 voluntary sector organisations interested. So, you know, we're really positive about the way forward, and that the panel will be able to progress shortly.
That's brilliant to hear. Thank you very much, Leisha. Okay, let's move on then. So I'm going to read out the officer recommendations in the report, which are that the committee notes the report and supports the recommendations set out within it. So there are 5 high-level recommendations, and these are, first, that the new resident and community panel will introduce a diverse representative panel replacing the Housing Management Board, embedding lived experience into service design and decision-making. The second is that incentives and support for participation, such as financial support, childcare, ICT access and recognition schemes, will be co-designed with residents and introduced to remove barriers and encouraging involvement. The third is that localised tiered engagement models at block, estate and neighbourhood level will ensure relevance, support regeneration and reflect community priorities. Number 4 is that we will work collaboratively with residents to co-design a new resident voice strategy and a resident engagement strategy. And the 5th is that we'll promote positive narratives and resident impact using storytelling, resident-created content and good news stories to highlight community pride and the value of social housing. I'd like to move those recommendations, and can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stone. Thank you. So, I'd like to ask for votes for those recommendations, first of all, and could you indicate your vote by hand, please? Thank you very much, and that is unanimous. Thank you, so that passes. Agenda item 13 is the Tackling Homelessness Transformation Programme update. This provides an update on the progress of the Tackling Homelessness Transformation Programme and is for noting. I'd like to invite Paul Sylvester, Head of Housing Options, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the latest quarterly update on the programme. We've been bringing them here for the last year or so. As a reminder, the Tackling Homelessness Programme includes various initiatives with the aim of improving outcomes for people who are experiencing homelessness whilst reducing the spend on temporary accommodation. So I'm here today presenting the report, but it's important that I say that there are many colleagues in the programme, and without them we wouldn't be here having the successes we are seeing today. I just wanted to mention their roles if possible. So to ensure we achieve our ambitious targets, we've got a dedicated programme team made up of a programme manager, 3 project managers and project support. We've got our Housing Festival colleagues working with us, providing excellent support and leadership around supply. And my brilliant colleagues across housing and in children's services are working together to really make things happen. So this really is a one council programme. So now on to the report. The report follows the same format as the previous ones. There is a progress update from paragraph 4, picking out developments around increasing supply of temporary accommodation, update on the council-owned registered provider, increasing access to the private rented sector, our homelessness prevention work, and our joint work with children's services on youth homelessness and housing. The programme costs and reduction overspend start from paragraph 29, and there is a detailed table under paragraph 36 setting out each saving, target, savings to date and current forecast. As mentioned earlier, there is under delivery on 3 savings set out in paragraph 37 and 38, which is compensated by over delivery on other initiatives. So we are at this point in time forecasting to achieve the total amount committed in the council's medium-term financial plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to go to questions and comment from the committee next. I'm going to start with Councillor Eddy.
Chairman, I'm conscious I've actually alluded previously to the human and financial advantages of this programme, so I don't intend to repeat myself. I aim to spare poor Sylvester's and blushes, although I'm happy to actually join him in thanking the hard-working members of his team. I'd just like to hone in on a question prompted by your risk table, Paul. Now, it talks about the problem of recruitment and retention of staff. Now, I hope I'm not being too simplistic here. I appreciate we've had difficulties in areas like the consumer standards program and various other areas. I'm certainly not seeking to actually downplay the challenges of tackling homelessness. But what particular posts are we having problems recruiting or retaining people to?
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Paul, would you like to respond?
Yep. Thank you. So one post in particular, which is a key role within Housing Options, which is the housing advisor role. So the people that work with citizens of Bristol who are homeless or threatened with homelessness. And when recruiting, there were always really great people that apply, and we appoint and we bring people in. What we do have is a relatively high churn of people coming in and mostly moving on successfully to other roles. So not a lot that I can do about that, and I'd actually actively encourage it. So, mostly within the council, yeah. So that's all good. So we're operating a bit as an apprenticeship for other services in the council. So it's keeping up with that churn. Things have changed over time. We don't get the volume of applications that we used to do for these roles. I think in days gone by, it was a lot easier to help more people. So the role is quite tough. It is very challenging, but it is also rewarding. So what we've done to deal with this is we've started to put in the mitigation, bring online more entry-level roles. So we've got these roles called homelessness assistants. We started with 3. We've now got 5. And what we're finding is pretty much all of those people that come in that role within 6 months to 12 months, they then become our housing advisors. Okay, so we're looking at ways of recruiting and getting people that way, but also growing our own, which seems to be really working.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
It's really good work. It's good to see lots of things happening. It's good. It's good that there isn't. I always worry when there's one solution to something, and so there were lots of good pieces of activities. 2 questions. One about the council-owned RP. I think the document says a report's coming to Strategy Resources in January 25. So I'm imagining it's 26, but I think that will be a really important tool for us to be able to expand that part of the market. My question is on the use of council rented accommodation for TA, which is something that residents notice, and there is a good reason for it, but there's a good amount of it. There is if that gets used too often in the same place too often, it causes concerns on community cohesion. So how is that managed?
Okay, that's a really good question, and something we're picking up in managing those temporary accommodation units in the community. And we appreciate that most of the lettings that we have for council housing happens in our areas where there's more council housing. So naturally, more temporary accommodation is happening in those areas. But we are being mindful of the impact on that, and colleagues on the ground are working with local groups and local residents just to explain what is going on. There seems to be some misconception around who we're housing and for what purpose. But yeah, just total clarity. These are Bristol citizens who are homeless that we're housing in accommodation that was council housing. There have been particular issues that have been brought to the attention by the colleagues across the council in terms of community development, etc., just so that we're alive to any tensions as they're building Councillor Logan in particular areas. But looking forward, me and colleagues, we look forward to the day when we can start to convert some of these homes back into council housing, and we are confident with the range of initiatives that are happening in the programme that time will come. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, it's a really important challenge, Councillor Logan, and that's, as Paul's outlined, I think the reason why when this committee approved the General Needs to Temporary Accommodation programme earlier this year, we approved it with a time limit, is because this is not something that we want to be doing in the long term, and this is something that we want to replace with other provision so that when possible we can return these homes back to council general needs council rent again, and that's why we're working on things like the new council-owned registered provider, which we talked about, and the various other kind of routes that we've got to provide for the very, very acute need that we have for temporary accommodation in the city right now. I think.
You've covered it.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Stone.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much also for all your hard work. It's absolutely brilliant. There's a couple of things. It was about our residential provider, but I'm sure those timescales will come in due course, because I'd like to know when that will be, when we will be open, when that will be open, basically. But I'm sure that will come in time. My question is about point 7 on the progress to date, and that is about the temporary accommodation that's being brought forward by a small company. I do believe that that's the prison build one, where they've completed one. They're on target to complete 4, but they have the delivery of a further 50 in which is obviously planned for the future. And I just wanted to know what kind of support that we're giving them to make sure that those 50 do actually become basically.
Okay.
That we actually do it, right? Yeah. So this is the initiative that involves prisoners building homes. So it's an absolutely brilliant initiative looking at putting in modular units on some MINWA sites and bits of land that aren't being used. I think we're going up to see some this afternoon actually with a local MP to talk about that work. I don't believe that there are any blocks or barriers in the way that we need anybody's assistance with it, but I note your very kind offer, and if we need to get back to the committee, we will do, absolutely. We really want this to happen and get over the line quickly.
Great, thanks very much. I'm not seeing any further hands, so I'm going to move us on, and I'm going to read out the officer recommendations, which are that the committee notes that the report states the Tackling Homelessness programme's financial objectives include £8,205,000 of recurring subsidy loss reduction in 2025-26 and a further £263,000 of recurring cost reduction on children's commissioning. The programme continues to work on additional initiatives that will result in further subsidy loss reduction. The committee notes that the report states that as per approval of the transformation funding at Strategy and Resources Committee on the 19th of May 2025, the Tackling Homelessness programme revenue budget is £1,925,947 for 2025-26, plus a rollover of £792,000 from 24-25 programme budget that wasn't spent, which gives a total of £2,717,947 plus £385,000 contingency held centrally by the Transformation Board. The committee also notes that no revenue funding has yet been approved for 2025-26-27, apologies, but the programme will make a request as necessary in line with the budget setting process in the coming months. And can I ask you all to note that report? Now, agenda item 14 is the Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Grant allocations for 2026-29. This report seeks approval to accept and spend Bristol's Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Grant Award for 2025-29 under a new single award, 2026-29, that's a typo, under a new single award that covers grant allocations for the Homelessness Prevention Grant, additional homelessness prevention grant funding due in November to support children experiencing homelessness, the rough sleeping accommodation programme, the single homelessness accommodation programme, and the rough sleeping prevention and recovery grant, and an additional award under that grant made in July 2025. The total grant allocation is expected to be up to £36,201,070. And this is a key decision because it involves spend of over £500,000. I'm going to ask Paul Sylvester again to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We brought a similar paper to committee last financial year seeking approval to accept and spend various grants. There is a lot of information in this report, but we feel that the benefits for the committee in seeing all of the grant expenditure in one place is clear. Just reflecting on the range of initiatives, interventions and the good work delivered by the council and its partners. And, I think it's both impressive and, quite frankly, it's overwhelming, all of the work that's done across the sector. So again, I want to take a moment to thank the various organisations and individuals across the wider homelessness sector, thank them for their dedication, commitment and energy. It is true partnership working and collaboration. So, onto the report. There are a number of changes to the grant regime since last year, since we brought the report last year. A number of the grants have been amalgamated into one grant award. We will no longer have to bid for funding, and allocations will be made on published methodologies. The funding will be longer term, 3 years, rather than annual. And the funding for temporary accommodation will be delivered through the Revenue Support Grant rather than the Homelessness Prevention Grant. And the idea behind the changes, and these are things that we've been asking for some time, is that it gives councils more certainty on funding and flexibility in how that funding is spent. So what do we know about the level of grant funding? So what we do know is, unfortunately, we'll find out in late December or early January. And it just simply isn't possible to wait until we have the grant award before we bring a paper to committee. You'll appreciate the commissioning of services for 3 years takes a long time to do, and we need to do the preparatory work now so that when we have the grant notification, we can start the process without delay. The award, when we get it, is likely to be one figure, not broken down by its previous component parts. But I think it's important for the committee to note that we have been advised that the rough sleeping element may reduce for Bristol as it may reduce for other big cities. For local authorities whose grant reduces, there will be a taper applied to minimise the impact. That's if you're a winner or if you're a loser. So the full impact isn't felt in 1 year. We don't know what that taper is going to be yet. And in speaking to MHCLG, basically said we've got to wait for the outcome of the autumn statement to get the global figure of the grants, and then the work will happen to break down the grants per local authority, which is why it takes time and why we won't know until December or early January. Also in the report, we've got two one-off awards of funding. One is the additional funding for this year to support families with children in TA, and how we're proposing to spend that with children's services in the report. And there's also additional one-off funding for the rough sleeping accommodation the rough sleeping prevention and recovery grant, and the plans for sending that are set out in the report. Thank you, Chair. Over to questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I think it's worth saying that we very much welcome the move to 3-year settlements and more certainty around our funding here, but we do have some pretty significant concerns about the formula that government has indicated it's likely to be using to allocate this funding. In particular, we think that it underestimates quite considerably the level of need that we have as a big city and a regional centre for support with our rough sleeping population, and we've written to government making those concerns plain as well. I'm going to move to questions, and I'm going to begin with Councillor Stone.
Okay, well, thanks again, Paul. having looked at this report and having looked at the amount of grant funding that we're getting at £36 million, and considering this is about rough sleepers, this is just it's really it's a conversation starter, Paul. This is what I want to do. Okay, yeah, I want to start a conversation about how and what we're doing with this £36 million. First of all, I looked at the appendix where it sort of broke it down, and we're looking at about approximately £6.5 million of fees going to places which I assume are incredibly meaningful. Can you, first of all, is that over the 3 years, or is it over 1 year? That 6.5 million.
Yes, it's the total grant awards for over 3 years, so it isn't that much each year. So it's 12 million a year.
No, I was looking at the £6.5 million in the appendix where you've broken down some of those fees. Is that over 3 years, or is that over 1 year in the appendix?
Okay. Do you want to point me to which bit in the report, then I can... Is it Appendix A?
Yeah, that's right.
It's Appendix A on further details on spend proposals, and those details are highlighting £6.5 million of fees being spent, and you've got a table, a list of items. Is that over 3 years, or is it over 1 year?
So that's the annual. That's the annual spend. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Which leads me on in my conversation very briefly, is that if we were to obviously spend that annual fee, we still have £6 million a year. Okay, yeah. And all I'm suggesting as a conversation starter is that if you divide that by approximately 1,700 people, you're looking at £3,500 per person, which could actually be, and in the report it stipulates that we're trying to create independent living for rough sleepers. So if you could just knock out the middle people and just directly give each individual rough sleeper £3,500, we could probably actually alleviate our rough sleeping programme with a one-off grant. Just over 1 year, you still have £12 million for the following year and £12 million for the following year for any backup situations or some form of net. I'm only talking about 1 year. That's £12 million, £3,500, independent living. Give them the money, see what they do with it. No attachments. It's a conversation starter, Paul, and I think we need that conversation.
Who wants to go first? I think both Paul and Sonia would like to respond on that. Sonia.
So it's an interesting suggestion, and it's probably one that we as officers have often considered in terms of the costs of some of our services. I think that the specific challenge around rough sleeping is that we're often dealing with people with really significant complexities, sometimes with addictions, sometimes with significant mental health issues. And I guess the concern would be, and we have seen this, for example, I know that there were a number of cases, for example, where people had large backdated payments from DWP of certain benefits and have ended up really significantly impacting their health by spending those money on their addictive issues. And I think actually there were 1 or 2 fatalities there. I think the other risk, would be exploitation, particularly for those with mental health issues, in terms of giving people cash who are sleeping rough and expecting them to, or we would still need to facilitate them to try and support them to make good decisions around that. But I think it's an interesting question, because I think there is an element here around the experience of adult social care around personal budgets, actually, where you actually talk to the person around. So I think there might be an opportunity for us to explore, if we were engaging with rough sleepers and asking them how they would want us to spend that money. I think there's something in there, but I think maybe at this point just giving funds directly could be counterproductive. But I think it's worth exploring.
Can I quickly come back on that? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. There is research done, and specifically about those things that you've just mentioned. First of all, drug and alcohol addictions often are because they are rough sleeping, and as soon as they're out of rough sleeping, actually drug and alcohol conditions are alleviated. It's a symptom of rough sleeping, not necessarily because they have predominantly drug and alcohol problems, okay? Because if you are rough sleeping on our streets, it's something that you can turn to quite easily and quickly. Mm-hmm. So that research is out there. Yeah. and it's similarly with mental health as well. Give somebody a clean home, dry place to live and sleep in. Some of those depression and mental health and anxiety issues will also go. So all I'm suggesting is maybe a pilot project where we choose a few people, maybe, you know, out of the 1,700, maybe 500 of them, where we can actually provide them with that amount of money and see if it actually works. Let's actually do something, you know, with no actual real end target game. Just see how it happens. Let's be flexible and progressive and bold.
Okay, thanks, Lisa.
Yeah. So I think we'll
Paul wants to respond.
take that conversation starter, and we can follow that outside. Just to say that we, as part of the commissioning of our rough sleeper services, we do provide funding. St Mungo's for use as personal budgets to get people to, start their tenancy, things that it may be a soup for an interview or different things like that, but not in the level that we're talking about here. But that is But let's pick it up. Yeah.
Thanks very much. I mean, I think probably one thing that your point directs us to as well, Councillor Stone, I think is the inadequacy of the current benefit system, which doesn't provide people with enough funds to live. Councillor Logan next.
So I think the direct question here is whether we should accept the money, and yes, I think we should accept the money. Like everyone, I'm worried about the impact of moving to a formula model, because regional cities are obviously going to attract more homeless people than the average for England. So I'm relieved to a bit that those messages have been made. I don't know. I'm sure we're not the only core city saying that, but I'm relieved that message has gone at least. My question is, as this will be a Formula 1 grant, is there any benefit in that compared to the several grants that you've had in the past? Presumably that means there's one flexibility. So will that have any benefits in terms of things that you would do that you might have not been able to do in terms of having the separate funding in the past?
Paul?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. It's probably worth just being clear that it's some of the grants were methodology based already, like the homelessness prevention grant was based on an allocation. It's really all those grants around rough sleeping where we had to create a business case and put a bid in, and then the government said yay or nay. So on it gives us flexibility to going forward. I think the way that we set the report out, just to provide a little bit of consistency in how we've been working to date, has been underneath those what will be legacy grant funding streams, just to see what the initiatives are and just to set those out clearly. So in getting to this place, we have carried out a review of all of the areas of work that we're looking at, particularly through the rough sleeping side of things, to see what's worked well, what hasn't, what we want to do more of, etc. And what it does allow us to do is to, in the previous regime, we had to bid and get approval from MHCFG just to make those decisions ourselves, so we can do it in a more timely way, depending on whether there's other services impacted or whatever. So becoming more sort of masters of our own destiny in terms of changing how we allocate and fund those services.
Thank you. Councillor Shabalala.
Thank you, Chair. As Lisa was suggesting, that I think this should be the beginning of opening up conversations to co-create what the spending proposals could be, as opposed to going with what is. Something that I know we would like to see is safe consumption rooms as a means of mitigating drug and alcohol, and those that are actually caught up with either being drug mules or anything like that, and that's not something that I'm kind of seeing here. So I think as much as the proposal is put set, we agree that yes, let's get the grants, but in terms of what the grant should be spent for, I think that needs much more political influence to really scope out if that's where some of the funds should be allocated to or not. And prioritize that. So I'd like to kind of suggest that as part of the recommendations, that we actually co-create the proposals together, so we can align what we think is a priority versus an officer-led approach into it. If I missed the opportunity for us to co-create, please let me know. But so far, I don't feel like we've actually had that much input in shaping this proposal.
Okay, thanks, James. I think specifically on the point around safe consumption rooms, I think that's a discussion that members of the public health and communities have had, but I understand that they're currently illegal. So we are very much unable to provide that service at the moment. Paul, would you like to respond a bit about how these spending proposals are shaped, and in particular, I think it might be helpful to talk a bit about the work that we do with our partners around developing the work that we do in order to reduce homelessness and support people affected by rough sleeping.
Yeah, very, very happy to. Yeah, so I wouldn't want to give the impression that the proposals have been produced by me and a couple of members of the team in a room in Temple Street. That clearly isn't the case. So we've got existing partnership arrangements, very, very strong around rough sleeping, and all of the proposals have gone there and been discussed with the people that are managing services who work with clients direct, with around about 20 to 25 organisations, looking at the things that we're doing already, how they can be tweaked and adapted and changed to have greater impact for clients, to both prevent people from rough sleeping and from getting them off the streets and housing them appropriately. And whilst we're not beholden to MHCLG, we've also been working with their specialist advisors, because they have a view across the country around what's working well, what's working best in other local authorities, and we've been talking to them and again to Core City. So, except the point around political engagement, I think that's important, but I just want to say that this is a well-refined piece of work from all of those stakeholders, looking at what we think we can the best impact for the money that we get, really. So but I am open to having discussions on how we can, have that engagement.
Yeah, let's take that away and have a think about that, shall we?
Thank you.
Councillor Stone again. No, Councillor Gooch.
I was just wanting to ask about this paragraph 28, the additional funding award, and there's a list of proposals. And I just wondered, is this list, there's quite a lot, is this something that you can only possibly do one or two of these, or are all of them on the table and could be done?
Apologies, paragraph 28, yeah?
Yeah.
I was looking for 48, I couldn't find it.
Sorry, 28, yes.
That's my hearing. So, it's great, isn't it, when we get one-off funding, but quite often it just arrives with no notification, and we need to look quickly how we can make best use of that. So all of those things there will, if I've understood the question, all of those things there will be covered by that additional grant.
Like all of them will be done?
Right.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not an either or. Okay.
No, all of those, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Right, we're going to move to a vote. Now, before we do that, I have to read the recommendations, and please bear with me because they're quite long. So, the recommendations are that the committee notes the amalgamation of homelessness and rough sleeping grants into one single award for 2026 to 29, notes the additional HPG funding due in November 2025, apologies, that's a homelessness prevention grant, HPG, to support children experiencing homelessness, notes the additional RSP-ARG funding, which is the Rough Sleeping Prevention and Recovery Grant, just checking that I've got that right, to reduce and prevent rough sleeping in the city. And then there's a number of contractual recommendations. And they are that the committee authorises the Exec Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, to enter into a grant agreement or memorandum of understanding and take all steps required to accept and spend the homelessness and rough sleeping grant funding for 2026-29, the additional award of RSP-ARG funding made in 2025-26, and the additional HPG funding for 25-26 outlined in the report. including procuring and awarding contracts which may be over £500,000 in line with the procurement routes and maximum budget envelopes set out in this report. Secondly, that the committee authorises the Executive Director of Housing, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, to accept and spend any grant funding spend that is over and above the predicted award, as set out in the report. That the committee authorises the Executive Director of Housing, in consultation with the Chair of the Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contracts being awarded up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in the report. Authorises the Executive Director of Housing, in consultation with the Chair, to bid for future funding from the Single Homelessness Accommodation Programme, and, if successful, accept and spend the funding, including procuring and awarding contracts which may be over the key decision threshold.
Chair, sorry, just for on contractual recommendation 1, just point of clarification.
Yep.
I think there might be a typo. Just check with Sonia. Should it read authorise the Executive Director of Housing rather than Growth and Regeneration?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, the report says Growth and Regen.
Okay. I'm not picking that up. I think it should probably say the relevant.
Yeah, I think we might need to. I think we do probably need to amend that, don't we? That I think it will have to say Executive Director for Housing. So I think we should amend that. Great. Yeah. So we'll change that in the decision record. And so I'm not going to read out all of those recommendations again, but that's the recommendation we'll be voting on. So noting that we've got 3 officer recommendations for noting and 4 contractual recommendations for approval, I'd like to move those and ask for a seconder. Councillor Reddy.
Sorry, I could wait till after the vote. I was just...
No, it's fine. We have time for discussion.
Yeah, I was just literally...
Those recommendations for the first time.
Desperately trying to actually find the recommendations, and I was just thinking, can we have the recommendations put at the top before all of the information, because it's so hard to find. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable request. I think probably we should endeavour to make sure that for all of our papers going forward, the recommendations are on the first page. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask for votes for and against those recommendations now. First, by indicating clearly with your hand, can I have votes for? And that is unanimous. So that passes. Thank you very much, everybody. Moving on. Agenda item 15 is the community-led housing sector update. So this report provides an update on the community-led housing land disposal policy for 2020 and the additional guidance issued in June 22 and the steps that have been taken as part of the 24-25 Community-Led Housing Enabling Service Review, as well as planned next steps and conclusions of the review. The report's for noting. I'd like to invite Louise Davidson, who's Head of Housing Delivery, to introduce and outline the report. Louise.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Yes, so the paper before you is an update on the progress of the council sites that are proposed for disposal as community-led housing, following the development of a community-led housing land disposal policy in 2020 and the 2 tranches of disposals which happened following that. 11 sites form the programme of CLH delivery coming forward under this land disposals programme. They're being delivered by 7 community-led housing providers who have been awarded what we've called preferred bidder status and who will acquire the sites once delivery is secure. Sadly, 1 community-led housing organisation has since folded, and that site is going to be brought forward through a different delivery programme. 9 sites are progressing and 1 site is currently stalled. It is worth noting that when the community-led housing programme was first developed, there was significant capital and revenue funding being made available from national government to support the sector. That was to the community-led organisations themselves. It created a network of community-led housing hubs to support the sector, and it provided significant amounts of revenue funding to local authorities to, again, support community-led housing delivery. That funding has now ceased. So the sector is running pretty much with the resources that it was available to it via fundraising, through our own internal resources here. And I think that really significantly has affected how the programme has worked within Bristol. And whilst it is acknowledged that the delivery of the sites has been slower than anticipated, this report does show that the majority of community-led housing sites are progressing positively, and despite the complex nature of the land that has been made available. Members are asked to note the intention to develop a formal review process for the sites. And this could ultimately result in a community-led housing organisation's preferred bidder status being rescinded if any agreed delivery milestones are not achieved. There is also a formal position statement in the report around the level of enabling support that the Council is currently able to offer the community-led housing sector. And that is about prioritising the capacity in the enabling team to support those providers which are delivering against our social rented housing priorities. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Louise. I'm going to start with Councillor Eddy.
It's just one quick query. The Sea Mills Training Centre, you'll be aware the chairman and I had a briefing about this a few weeks ago. And as you state in your report, we're advising the applicant to either withdraw their planning application or to have it reviewed. Have we set a date for that?
That is sitting with our planning colleagues, and it is something we need to pick up and draw a line under, I think, Councillor Eddy.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Logan.
When it works really well. And there are a not very big number, but sites that have been successful have worked and have delivered really good solutions. And I'm very lucky in Philwood. Weekend Make is obviously based in Philwood and does a really good job at finding creative solutions to tiny and quite small sites that work really well. And I was really pleased that they had planning permission agreed for the Rodford Meads project, which is a really good one. So I'm happy with what's happened. We are lucky in this city to have a sector that has that capability, because not all cities have. So I agree with the comments in the report. I feel the report feels a little bit non-committal, or in terms of I'm not sure what's happening next. So my question is, it would be really good to identify some more sites. It would be really good to work with the sector where we can, because where we find the right sites, that they deliver sites that other providers wouldn't deliver in the same way.
Yes, so what we have said in the report, and acknowledging that we're not in a position to make any commitments to anything around this, is that when we do the review of the next affordable housing delivery plan, we do, as a council, need to absolutely decide what we are going to do with our community-led housing sector. I think a lot of that will depend on the amount of funding that is available for the sector, because at the moment it is a struggling sector. And we don't have the funding available to support it or the capacity. So I think when we start that conversation next year, it's something that we will all have to tackle and bring forward in light of other programmes around small sites as well. Yes, absolutely. We do need to have a clear steer for the sector.
So I agree with that. Absolutely, that's really helpful. My only other point is to say, where we are identifying sites which we are struggling to find a solution for, I'm blessed with a number of those in Philwood, as it happens. It would be nice to work with the community-led housing where we haven't found a solution for the other providers been able to work forward. And I think there are a couple of sites where that would be a possibility, funding notwithstanding. But thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I've got Councillor Stone next, and then Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, so thanks very much, Louise. Yeah, so I can understand the reticence to go forward with community-led housing, because it isn't actually providing us with the homes that we desperately need. So putting in those, I can see in the report it says quite clearly that you're putting in milestones, and if they don't reach those milestones, then we will be hopefully reappropriating that land. It is our land at the end of the day. And I would assume, and again, it is a conversation piece that has to go forward, as Councillor Logan said, but I'm hoping that we would go forward with possibly our own residential provider by that time, where we're looking at places for people to provide temporary accommodation in small sites, people that are well versed on working on small sites, because We've just got to look at some of the evidence that's going on. You know, in St George, we've got places for people building those temporary accommodation units quite quickly, quite reasonable priced, and we're getting people off our streets and into homes, and that's our main obligation. My question is that why you're feeling a little bit resident, or are we still waiting for this conversation?
I think on any piece of land in the city there are a number of potential delivery opportunities and options, and it's our job as officers to advise whether it's the general fund or whether it's the HRA as to the most effective, cost-effective and timely solution. Now, for some of those sites, it might be disposal to an RP to build something like you've mentioned, places for people. It might be through the new RP in the longer term. It might be through the small sites aggregator programme. It might be a meanwhile use, as you've heard Paul talk about. So, and it might in the longer term be some sort of community-led housing. I think it's very difficult today, sitting here, to go X piece of land could be used for Y, but all of those options are there. And that's why when we talk about the next iteration of the Affordable Housing Delivery Plan, we need to be looking at all of those and understanding how we're going to make those choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that that I think this paper does actually is that it gives Louise's team the sort of framework that they need to be able to work with community-led providers in a way that is that avoids, I think, what we've called the long no. You know, there are, I mean, Louise and her team are absolutely 100% focused on delivery, and I think it's a real tribute that we're seeing in this paper with the schemes that we have, you know, in progress through the land disposal programme. A pretty high level of expected delivery. You know, given that these are, you know, in the main small organisations without much of a track record, and you know, a lot of that is through the, you know, the hard work and the work that Louise's team have done in partnership with those organisations to help them sort of move through the process. But we do need to be able to, you know, make a clear-eyed assessment about when a scheme is not going to go ahead and when we need to bring that land back and think of an alternative use for it. And I think that's what this paper gives us the opportunity to do. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. I mean, I agree with the thrust of supporting and promoting the sector, and I think introducing the notion of the sort of the gateways so that those organisations that aren't delivering fail faster is really important. And I think it would be good to see whether there is something that can be done in terms of the sector. I mean, it feels like a symposium in the sector of some kind of what are, you know, how can we support and nurture this sector, and I'm afraid weed out the people who are not able to do the delivery, because there's some great capability within the city. And so, yeah, support you in the direction. But
thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Shabalala and then Councillor Gooch.
Thanks. I'll just echo what Councillor Logan was saying there, is that when it's done good, it's amazing. And we can see such in terms of the Southmead Development Trust, what's it, Glencoyne sites. And I think this is also around thinking about the size, because most of the sites that have been allocated are small sites. But when it's a bigger site, there's much more potential for positive viability. Now, I'm not looking at the profitability of this, but I'm just looking at the community impact of when using, for example, community land trust. The economic value that is then generated through those models is so much more meaningful, and those would be the appropriate, in my opinion, appropriate vehicles to actually be going forward with developments because of the structure that they have, the external support that they have, the network that they have, and the investment that they can actually bring in. I would like to kind of encourage more community-led housing, but probably not more on the small scale, because the viability is a bit more challenging. But the expertise do matter. Thanks for the report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gooch.
Yeah, so I think my worries really are about cost effectiveness. I was just thinking, as we sort of go forward, I guess it's for every site we need to think about cost effectiveness, and then maybe looking at who's delivering well. How are they doing it? Are they, even if they're doing it well, are they still? Could they do it better? Could we go down the modular route with these places, especially where we've got issues with not being able to get contractors and planning permission in place with nothing happening? I think there's a sort of piece of work to be done on whether or not it's cost effective to carry on doing this, given the amount of kind of the hand holding that has to go on, and the some groups not having the expertise that say other groups do. So yeah, I think there's a lot of questions still.
Yeah, thanks Councillor Gooch. Yeah, and I think a lot of that does come back to some of what we were talking about earlier on, really, with the state of the sector as a whole. Not just in Bristol but elsewhere. It's had a kind of stop-start record of support from central government, and there's a limit to what we can do. Going it alone, but I think what we've got here is a really clear account of what our enabling offer can be to organisations who are looking to bring forward these sites in our land disposal programme, and I think that probably gives us a kind of basis for what our future relationship with this sector could look like. Great. I'm going to move us on. And I'm going to read the officer recommendations, which are that the committee notes the information set forth in this report, including the monitoring and review processes that have been prepared for the existing community-led housing land disposal policy and the interim community-led housing enabling offer. I'd like to ask the committee to note that report. And then we're going to move on to our final agenda item, which is agenda item 16, and that's an update on the Bedminster, Brislington West and Horfield property licensing scheme. This report presents the interim outcomes of the selective and additional licensing scheme for Bedminster, Brislington West and Horfield wards, which commenced on the 6th of April 2022. The report is for noting. And I'd like to ask Tom Gilchrist, who's Head of Service for Private Housing, to introduce the report. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. So as Barry's outlined, the purpose of bringing this report is to provide you with an update on the Brislington, Bedminster West and Horfield property licensing scheme, which is now just over halfway through its 5-year licensing term. The actual licensing scheme itself included both small multiple occupied buildings in 3 wards, and the 3 wards I've mentioned, and then single family homes in Bedminster and Brislington West wards. The licensing scheme started on the 6th of April 22 and will run for 5 years until April 2027. The report is included in your pack, and I hope members have had an opportunity to read it, along with the various appendices, which have an awful lot of statistical data of what has been delivered so far. The report outlines the progress towards meeting the key objectives of the licensing scheme and how well progress is improving towards meeting those objectives. And a large proportion of the inspections have already been completed. And that has been done to preempt what we could see coming a couple of years ago with the introduction of a citywide multiple occupied scheme and a further 3-ward property licensing scheme covering single family homes in Bishopston, Bedminster West and Horfield. There's an awful lot of statistical information in there. As I said, the data is in Appendix 1, 2 and 3 if you want to look at them, but there's a couple of pieces of information that I think stand out that you might want to be aware of. In the single-family home scheme covering Bedminster and Brislington West wards, 74% of those properties inspected have not failed to meet the licensing conditions, 74%. 19% of properties failed to meet the minimum housing standards. And in the additional licensing scheme covering all 3 wards, so that includes the Horfield ward, 93% of properties failed to meet the licensing conditions. 28% failed to meet minimum housing standards. And 78% of properties have improvements made to fire safety. And those are the key risks in a multiple occupied building, is fire and safety risk to enable residents to escape to a place of safety if a fire starts. There is also included within the report a range of enforcement actions that we've taken so far as in the 3 years of the scheme, including one landlord who we have banned from operating because of the extremely poor condition of the property, CPNs and compulsory civil penalty notices that have been served, and prosecutions that have been done against landlords who have failed to comply with our requirements. There are still, however, a large number of enforcement actions still to be taken. We have identified problems. They are working through the legal processes. So I suspect by the end of the 5-year period, we will have more information to provide you with on how those cases came out, outcome of those cases. So I would just like to summary and say there are 2 years still of the 5 years left of this licensing scheme, but almost 95% of properties have already been inspected. And as a result of that, staff were initially brought into the scheme to make sure that we met the pressures we could see coming from the large 2 schemes that we brought to committee for approval back in August last year. So finally, I would say that the interim outcomes achieved through this licensing scheme clearly show that proactive inspections that come through property licensing and improvements in the private sector has clearly been demonstrated by the report so far. I'd like to ask members if they have any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Tom. And I think once again, I mean, we've received reports on previous licensing schemes to this committee, haven't we? And I think once again, this sort of really demonstrates the value that our licensing activities have in protecting renters and keeping people safe in their homes. You know, in the same way as with our consumer standards program in our council-owned homes, we're really committed as a council to making sure that people are safe and are able to feel safe in their homes. I think this is a real key tool in our box of tools for ensuring the same for private renters. I'd particularly like, if you haven't already looked at it, I'd like to draw members' attention to Appendix A3, which shows photographs of some of the hazards that our licensing team encountered when they visited some of the homes in this scheme, and some of them are pretty shocking. And you've got before and after photos showing the remedial works that were undertaken to make those homes safe for people. I'm going to invite questions and comments from members. Councillor Shabalala first.
Brilliant. Again, and I guess for me, is really to understand, Tom, what's the capacity of your team that enables you to be so effective at actually doing all the checks? And you know, we heard earlier about the homeless teams, revolving cycle. About how's your team's kind of capacity and people kind of staying, and how are you able to do this more? Like, you know, what's the gaps and challenges and opportunities that you see to deliver this better or more?
Well, I think generally across all private housing teams there are national staff shortages. And my own team is included within that. We do have a number of gaps within our services. I think there are a couple of things we've tried to put into place to alleviate those shortfalls, and I think Paul outlined it earlier when he was talking about the homelessness teams. We've done something similar in my own services. Over many years, we've had apprentices that we've brought in, started them off early within the system, got them up to speed in what we do. We have a competency progression programme within my service, because obviously it's very much enforcement orientated. So it's trying to bring the skills to building severe individuals with the enforcement capacity as well. So that progression criteria is now in place. We've had it there for a few years. We've tweaked it and altered it slightly. But as part of the licensing schemes, we've always had to recruit additional resources in. And certainly for the large 2 schemes that we approved last year, they resulted in up to 30 extra staff having to be recruited. Now, and those staff have taken time to get up to speed, but we're there. In effect, I wouldn't say we've got plenty of resources. We have gaps, but to deliver this, staff are monitored to the nth degree. They have weekly inspections that they're expected to do, and obviously there's a process if they don't. So we monitor outcomes, and that I think is shown in what we've delivered so far. And there is a challenge there in monitoring outcomes of staff, because staff want to be the best. They want to do more. And actually that has really encouraged I think some of the deliverables we've delivered so far. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to say, Chair, it's so encouraging to see that level of internal progression and competency and performance, because then what that means is that our residents can feel that reassurance that your team is putting, and they can feel that level of safety. But more on top of that is that landlords know that Bristol is not here to play. So thank you very much for the work that you and your team do.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gooch.
It's great to see the tangible improvements. Those photos are fantastic, because it's actually like making people's lives better and safer. One thing, I know you're only here to report on these, but how many wards have we actually got the licensing schemes in?
Right, so currently we've got a all-ward multiple occupied scheme in place. So when the Bedminster ward, the Bedminster Brislington West and Horfield ward was approved back in 2022, the citywide scheme wasn't in place. So almost the properties that are currently covered into this scheme will, when their licence expires in 5 years' time, have to reapply under the citywide scheme. So in effect, all multiple occupied buildings in Bristol have to be licensed currently. In addition to that, we have currently got 6 wards. So in addition to the 3 I've mentioned here, there are 6 further wards with single family home licence requirements in place. So that's not a citywide scheme at this stage. And the challenge, the reason we haven't done that at this point in time is about meeting the legal justifications for designation. Now, we are currently looking at that at the moment, because there are quite a high bar to reach. And again, when the Bedminster, Brislington West and Horfield scheme was introduced, you had to apply to the Secretary of State for approval for single family homes over a 20% threshold of licensed properties in Bristol. That requirement changed some months ago under the new government, and that has actually made it easier for local authorities to introduce wider and larger schemes for singly occupied homes. So that's something we're currently looking at the moment.
Thank you. We are rapidly closing in on 1 o'clock, so I'm going to give the last word to our newest member, Councillor Bales.
So I'm not sure if you have already answered some of this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just so that I'm clear in my mind. On additional licensing, for example, 92% of properties in Bedminster didn't meet the required standard, and over a third had serious safety hazard. I just wanted to highlight this, as I think it shows the importance of these schemes. I understand a citywide licensing scheme is underway. Could you provide an update on this, and are you doing inspections yet?
Thank you.
I can say that we are doing inspections. Inspections started last year. As I said, there was a large recruitment programme that we had to put in place. I haven't got any numbers to give you at this stage, but what I can say is that we will be able to give an outline of how we're progressing. I'm hoping early part of next year when we are proposing to bring an update on the Renters Reform Bill, which obviously received royal assent earlier this week around the rented sector. So I'm hoping come February, when that report is scheduled, we may be able to give you some indicative figures of how we're getting on that scheme.
Great, thanks very much. We are at 1 o'clock now, so I'm afraid I know there are people with hands up, but I'm going to have to close it there because people have other places to go. I'm going to read the officer recommendations, which are that the committee notes the interim outcomes of the Bedminster, Brislington West and Horfield additional and selective licensing schemes, and approve publication of those key outcomes so far. Just before closing the meeting, I wanted to let members know that the person who came at the start of our meeting with a complaint about the damp and mould in her home, we offered to visit with a surveyor this afternoon, and I think she's not available this afternoon, so that visit's going to happen on Monday. And that is the close of the meeting. Thank you very much.
Can I just have one the NEC IT software, is there any chance of getting some training? So we know what's going on, so we know how it works and how it helps.
Yeah, we can look into that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely weekend.